Chapter 1760. Agrima, who was surrounded by mountains, paced back and forth in the sky above the ruined main city. Through the wooden walls of the great chieftain's hall, it went straight into the ears of everyone inside. "Great chieftain, I'll go and disperse those ignorant brats." Varrock was indignant. Not only him, but the other guards of the great chieftain were the same. Thrall waved his hand and smiled bitterly. "What if they don't want to leave? Then beat them up. What if those young people impulsively use weapons?" Varrock hesitated. Was he really willing to suppress his own people with blood? On the contrary, young Salyafar was even more irritable. Although he was already a Death Knight, he was still deeply trusted by the great chieftain. After the return of the Sun King, Anastrian stepped down as the leader of the Forsaken, and now Dranos Salyafar became the leader of the Forsaken as a Death Knight. Dranos waved his arms vigorously. "Those scum! If I wasn't already dead, I'd go to the gate and put up a flag. If they have the ability, come to Makara." They refuse to obey the leadership of the strongest, and dare not challenge. What kind of traditional beast men are they? Thrall didn't say anything. He looked at young Salyafar with infinite regret. If possible, he would have preferred Dranos to be his successor. Unfortunately, this kid died in the hands of Arthas, even if he regained his freedom after becoming a Death Knight. But a tribe dominated by beastmen couldn't have a Forsaken as the great chieftain. At least not in the current atmosphere. Wajin spoke. "Great chieftain, I smell a conspiracy. In fact, I would suggest that we immediately send more people and encourage those who are dissatisfied to directly launch Makara. Let the challengers first challenge the various chieftains, and then challenge the great chieftain as a chieftain. If you can win a few rounds, the atmosphere of the tribe will be much better." The bitter smile on Thrall's face became even more bitter. "What's the point of just stabilizing my rule? If the tragic state of the tribe can't be improved, then it's meaningless for anyone to be the great chieftain." Standing in the great hall of the chieftain, and looking out through the window, most of Orgrimmar was moaning in the ashes. Even though Thrall had used his power to suppress all the violent fire elementals, more and more scattered fire elementals still managed to invade Orgrimmar during the elemental disaster, bringing even more destruction to Orgrimmar. By the time Varrock and the other Horde bandits had killed all the Twilight believers, half of Orgrimmar had been destroyed. What made the tribe leaders even more depressed was that the entire territory of the tribe had been hit by the elemental disaster, and even more serious, the cataclysm. The Nushui River, which separated Duroder and the Barren Land, swelled due to tectonic movements and flooded a large area in the central and western part of Duroder. It became the Nushui River Basin, which was divided by crisscross pools. A terrifying trail of lava cut through the Barren Lands from the northwest to the southeast. Now that place was called Great Rift Valley. The southwest of the Stoneclaw Mountain area was originally under the control of the tribe. A sudden volcanic eruption completely destroyed an important town there, and more than 5,000 people lost their lives. Now it had been renamed Coal Valley. The Thousand Needles and the Flashing Plains were flooded. At least, most of the areas in the Thousand Needles were controlled by the tribe. Those were the simple losses from the disaster. What happened next was the real headache. The Desolate Land, which was conquered by the traditional orcs who migrated from Galan and Nagrand. The originally barren wilderness was gradually brought under the jurisdiction of the tribe. Even if Gruul didn't listen to orders, it was still under the control of the tribe. The cataclysm changed the landscape there, and a new green basin was born in the center of the Desolate Land. The unexplainable crustal changes, and the transfer of life energy, made the barren land there suddenly green. The trees inside grew wildly. This attracted the attention of the Cenarian Circle. The Night Elf Druids of Fandral Staghelm and the Tauren of Thunder Bluff both chose to settle there, which undoubtedly increased the territorial conflict. In turn, because Thrall sought to solve the problem through dialogue, this angered Gruul. The demigod Behemoth was extremely irritable. He felt that his dignity had been insulted. On the other hand, Thrall's protest against the alliance was met with difficulties. Duque had indeed sent a stern inquiry to Darnassus, asking why Fandral led the army into the territory of the tribe without the approval of the alliance. Fandral was a member of the Cenarian Circle and prided himself on his status. He believed that all forests and green lands should be under the jurisdiction of the Cenarian Circle, especially the new green lands. Thus, he flatly refused the Alliance's mediation. But could things like identity and race be so easily separated? They were druids, yes, but the problem was that they were night elves first, and then druids. Tyrande almost went crazy with anger. If you're not a night elf, you don't have to look to the Alliance for support. Tyrande was also angry. This undoubtedly deepened the existing conflict between the Alliance and the tribe. After all, in Northrend's northern expedition, the tribe had lost more than 250,000 troops. However, because the tribe had retreated before they attacked the Iceground Fortress, they didn't get any benefits from the Iceground Fortress. The radical beastmen, led by Gurus, felt that the tribe had paid a huge sacrifice for nothing. This was unreasonable, and strongly demanded that the Northwind tundra of Northrend be part of the tribe's territory. Duque didn't express his opinion on this. This time it was Kalego's turn. As the new dragon king of the Blue Dragons, Kalegos might be a scumbag, but he wasn't careless when it came to the interests of the tribe. He directly announced that the Northwind tundra had been the hunting ground of the Blue Dragons since ancient times, and that the Warsong Beastman deserved to be slaughtered by Malago's subordinates. If the tribe intended to occupy the Northwind tundra, it would be seen as a declaration of war against the Blue Dragons. The five-colored dragons were of the same breath. Now that the Blue Dragons had set things right, Alexstrasza directly came out to support Kalegos. She also announced to the tribe that if the tribe wanted to occupy the Northwind tundra, the Dragon Slumber Temple would not sit idly by. This time, Gurus was completely deflated. He shamelessly asked Thrall to ask Duque for the Grizzly Hills. In the end, before they could even negotiate with the Alliance, Thrall rejected him. The attack on the Grizzly Hills was basically handled by the main force of Stormwind, led by Varian. Even if it was incorporated as territory, Stormwind would have priority. Chapter 1761. The Horde didn't have the strength to threaten the Alliance, let alone their position. As a great leader, Sal's charisma was unquestionable. He abided by his principles and couldn't bring himself to ask Duque for territory, especially on the Eastern Front, where the Horde didn't participate. Being principled was Sal's strength, but it was also Sal's weakness. If he was more ambitious, the Horde might be more aggressive and have a wider territory than it was now. Conversely, Duque wouldn't have allowed the Horde to exist until now. After receiving news of the Horde's internal strife, Jaina immediately went to find Duque through the portal. How will the Alliance deal with it? Theramore is already under martial law. In this life, Jaina didn't have any sympathy for the orcs, because Duque deliberately tricked her when she was young. It was even more impossible for her to have an unclear relationship with Sal like in history. If Theramore had been established for her own cause, after she became Queen of Bakor Tiras, and moved the focus of Bakor Tiras to Hidden Treasure Bay under Duque's suggestion, Theramore's position changed. Now, Theramore was not only a window of communication between the Alliance and the Horde, but also a bridgehead for the Alliance to invade the Horde's territory when necessary. Apart from retaining the necessary functions of military logistics and a trading port, Theramore was purely a stronghold. Faced with Jaina's question, Duque smiled and shook his head. The Horde's current conflict is just the inevitable result of their expansion being suppressed. In fact, solving the conflict is very simple. As long as there is enough territory to settle the excess orcs who migrate from Nagrand, and let them live and develop, then nothing will happen. Jaina immediately understood Duque's position. Her pretty face was full of cold sneers. If the Horde's territory is not enough, the Alliance has the obligation to fight for new territory for them? If it's not enough, do we have to cut our own flesh and feed it to these green-skinned creatures? After all, they were the leaders of the Alliance, not the chiefs of the Horde. How could they do something stupid and give away their own territory, just for the survival needs of the Horde radicals and their endless greed for territory? It could be said that 15 years after the Beastmen arrived at the Kalimdor continent, Duque had been secretly restricting the development of the Beastmen, and it had finally paid off. Duque's plan was very big, and no one in the tribe noticed. By the time Sal and the others found out, the Alliance had already stopped the development of the tribe. In the Kalimdor continent, there were many ownerless lands. Whoever could occupy it first and stabilize it would develop well. Moreover, Duque and Sar both knew that if Azeroth hadn't been threatened by so many evil forces, the Alliance and the Horde would have already started a war. Since there was no way to start a war, the game between the Alliance and the Horde would be reflected in their own development. The tribe's population was small, and their economic foundation was even worse. They were destined to need to develop at a faster pace in order to obtain strength that was close to that of the Alliance. The original history was that the Lordaeron continent was completely destroyed, and the Alliance's strength was greatly reduced. The Horde took the opportunity to catch up. Duque's appearance not only saved the Lordaeron continent, but even revived the 3 destroyed kingdoms of Lordaeron, Alterac, and Stromgarde. Coupled with all kinds of black technology and economic policies that transcended the era, the Alliance's economic strength and military strength were far above the Horde's after 10 years. That made Sal even more afraid to start a war. However, the situation had now changed. The influx of more than 2 million orcs from Draenor had indeed greatly increased the population of the Horde, but it had also brought a heavy burden to the people's livelihood. The continuous natural disasters, as well as the Calamity Army and other dark forces causing trouble, made the orcs who had escaped the destruction of Draenor feel like they had just escaped the tiger's den and entered the wolf's den. When the cataclysm broke out, the internal contradictions that had been accumulating for a long time were finally fully exposed. Orgrimmar, and even the entire Horde, were now like a powder keg. With just a little spark, there would be a big explosion that would blow the Horde into pieces. Does Sal dare to lead the Horde to war with the Alliance? Jaina asked. Duque shook his head. It's precisely because Sal is rational, and is the orc who knows the Alliance the best in the entire Horde that he doesn't dare. On the contrary, ignorance and recklessness make him fearless. Jaina immediately understood what Duque meant, and the sarcasm on her face intensified. Those orcs whose brains are still stuck in the prehistoric era really think that the Alliance is the sparsely populated Draenei. Traditional orcs were extremely barbaric. If they were unhappy, they would fight. If they were unhappy, they would fight. Anyway, they would fight for territory every day. How could there be no deaths? If they lost, they would admit defeat. If the other party did not let them go, they would simply exterminate the Horde. Over thousands of years, countless clans had disappeared in the long river of history, and countless ambitious orcs had become independent from the old clans and created new ones. Back then, the orcs had established the old Horde, launched a war against the Draenei and won. In fact, there were several important reasons. First, the absolute value of the population was disproportionate. Before Draenor was destroyed, the Horde had a population of at least tens of millions. And the Draenei were automatically chased by Kil'jaeden's Burning Legion, and had never exceeded 1 million. The Draenei had lost too much technology, and only had holy light magic left. This allowed the Horde's population advantage to play a role. In addition, Kil'jaeden had given Gul'dan evil magic, and nurtured a large number of warlocks among the orcs, which largely offset the advantage of the holy light. And now, the Alliance had popularized modern weapons on Earth with TNT explosives as the core. And there was also the magical black technology of the flying fortress and flying battleship. Not to mention that the Horde had less than 3 million people. Unless all the warriors in the Horde were professionals who had stepped into the hero realm, even if there were 10 times this number, they would not be a match for modern artillery. Was it so easy to produce a hero realm expert? Including the morning level mages at most, whether it was the Horde or the Alliance, they could only reach 4 digits. After hearing Jaina's words, Duque also sneered. If you want to destroy someone, you must first make them crazy. The Horde is already a crazy train heading towards hell. No matter what Sal does, it will only delay the speed of their descent into hell. If we don't fundamentally remove the influence of the traditional orcs, the Horde is destined to be destroyed. As Duque concluded this, Sal, who was in Orgrimmar, turned his head and pointed at a stack of documents. Do you see this? Even the Horde's reports for recording important events use the Alliance's paper. Do you really think that the Alliance's lead over us is in a single area? No. That's an all-round backwardness. Unfortunately, many little bastards think that even if these technologies are really useful, as long as we defeat the Alliance, we can get all the Alliance's technologies. Varric's voice was full of bitterness. Chapter 1762. Ridiculous. Is the technology of the Alliance so easy to steal? The one who spoke was the boss of the Goblin Rustwater conglomerate, the Prince of Trade. Sal never really believed this despicable goblin. Garavex became the king of trade by exploding, selling out his goods, or betraying everyone he knew. When Calero Volcano erupted, only Garavex had a refugee ship. He charged every refugee their life savings as a fee. Then he packed up every goblin in the upper class like sausages, ready to sell them as slaves. The monster like Garavex betrayed all his people for more almond coins. During the Second Dark Portal War, he became the chairman of the Copper Street Joint Venture, a consultant of the Tinkerers Alliance, an important goblin in the Trade Alliance, and the second richest person in the Rustwater conglomerate. He called himself. After a few months of plotting, he killed the former king of trade Marty at a banquet. Through various pretenses and small businesses, he owned most of the former's property in the Trade Alliance, stole the land under his name, and finally became the new king of trade. If the Alliance hadn't ruined all of this despicable guy's businesses and sealed off all his bloody ways to make money in the Alliance, he probably wouldn't have become the Alliance's mortal enemy and turned to the Horde. In fact, although Sal disdained to steal the technology of the Alliance, he never stopped Garavex from sending people to steal technology from the Alliance. Unfortunately, corpses hung from the walls of the Alliance's factories and research institutes from time to time, as well as Garavex's temper every once in a while, proved that the Goblin leader's plans had failed again and again. Duque had set up the magic net in every new technology research and development center, and every major factory in the Alliance. Those soul guards who never needed to sleep monitored every corner of every important place in the Alliance through the magic net. Except for no more than 20 gnome craftsmen, including Gerben, no one in the entire Alliance had a complete set of new technology. The most frightening thing was that the greatest inventor and leader of the Alliance's new technology happened to be Duke Marcus himself. If it was someone else, they might be able to cut off the Alliance's momentum through abduction, or even assassination. But this scummy goblin leader would never be able to deal with the real demigod of Azeroth. The Alliance could export a lot of products to the Horde, but they would not export any new technology that was close to the forefront of the Alliance's technology. The gnomes, with their vile personalities, only had the ability to steal and modify. When it came to research and development, the gnomes were far superior to the gnomes. For example, the flying battleships. Until now, the gnomes had yet to create a flying battleship that could fly for 100 hours without any accidents. The Alliance had already begun to develop the third-generation propeller and Titan anti-gravity hybrid flying battleships. Anyone with a brain would feel despair at this gap. However, the group of Nagalan orcs, who only had cold weapons in their minds and were close to primitive people, still had fanatical confidence. They firmly believed that if there was anything that one person couldn't solve, it could definitely be solved with 10,000 people. If they couldn't win, it was only because they didn't have enough determination and not enough people had died. Of course, in theory, once they started a war with the Alliance, as long as they used up the Alliance's ammunition with human lives, they could drag the Alliance into hand-to-hand combat, which the Beastmen were best at. But was this possible? Coincidentally, at this critical juncture, the traditional orcs, who were the mainstream of the tribe, issued the strongest voice of resistance so far. If they didn't do anything, this sound would soon become the only melody in the tribe. Sal felt a sense of sorrow that suffocated him. At this moment, a messenger came, followed by a group of soldiers, each soldier holding a thick stack of report envelopes in his hand. Each envelope was marked with a blood-colored feather that represented urgency. Sal's heart sank. The changes in geological conditions that had occurred in various places, due to the catastrophe, were the results of the Wyvern Scouts' inspections. And these reports were the tribe's losses. Even if he didn't want to think about it, he knew that this was only the first wave. Put it down, Sal ordered a little dispiritedly. Sal, Wajin, and even Varrock sat down together and read each report as quickly as possible. They marked the losses on the sand table map of the chieftain's hall. After half a day, the result was shocking. Since the day of the catastrophe, more than 100,000 tribespeople had died. Some died in the disaster, and more than 70% died under the raging elementals. There were reports of patrols and garrisons being attacked everywhere. But with the weapons in the hands of the orcs, it was difficult to cause any effective damage to the fire elemental creatures. The shaman was simply in short supply. Sal finally made a decision to convene a small meeting of the leaders. The participants included the troll leader Wajin, the Tauren chief Kane, the forgotten leader Dranish, the prince of trade Garavix, Sal's advisor, the old orc warrior Eitrig, and Gurus Hellscream. I think everyone knows what has happened to the tribe recently. Sal opened the meeting first. Gurus crossed his arms over his chest, his face full of displeasure. I know. The territory we conquered in the north was shamelessly stolen. The Alliance refused to share the spoils of war with the tribe. And the damn black lizard Nesario, because of his personal hatred with the Dragon Guardian and the Alliance, launched a revenge on the entire planet, implicating the tribe. Wajin couldn't help but say, "Young man, don't talk nonsense. The evil ancient gods have never stopped conspiring to destroy the world. Whether there is an alliance or not in this world, it will still." Sal interrupted the troll chief. "Forget it, Wajin, we have more important things to deal with." Dworkin gave Gurish a death stare, and finally fell silent. Gurish snorted coldly, and didn't even look at Wajin. Their behavior gave Sal a big headache. However, Sal forcefully pulled the topic back. The serious problem we are facing now cannot be solved by swords and axes alone. The earthquake shook every piece of land, and the elemental creatures wreaked havoc in the countryside. I heard our planet Azeroth screaming in pain. If we don't solve this worldwide disaster, not to mention the Alliance tribe, all the creatures on this planet will be finished. This topic was so heavy that even someone as arrogant as Garrosh fell silent. Sal continued. My spies have just received news that Magni Bronzebeard, the Bronzebeard king of the Iron Furnace Fort, decisively turned himself into a diamond man through the earth's slate in order to pursue the power of a demigod. I think it is time for the tribe to make sacrifices and concessions. Chapter 1763. Sacrifice and concessions? Almost as soon as they heard these two words, Kane and Wajin jumped up. Great Chieftain, wait. Great Chieftain, you can't be. Sal waved his hand. Don't get excited, sit down. His fierce order forced the two chieftains to sit down obediently. In the conference room, everyone pricked up their ears. Yes, I am indeed going to follow Magni Bronzebeard's example and pursue the power of a demigod. In fact, my strength has long reached a bottleneck. As long as I take advantage of the time when the will of Azeroth asks for help to fight, I still have a good chance of success. Think about it, a real demigod, what that means to the tribe. Kane and Wajin were all silent. The tribe was suppressed by the Alliance, of course, because of the economy, technology, and military fields. The key was the lack of high-end combat power. Gruul, the king of Galan, could not be a match for the demigods of the Alliance. After all, Gruul was only a demigod, not a real demigod. If the Alliance and the tribe fought, Gruul would never be able to hold on, and he would run away or change sides in minutes. If the tribe could have a real demigod, at least in terms of high-end combat power, it would be possible to compete with the Alliance. Even if they could not be on an equal footing with the Alliance, they would at least have the power to resist. Everyone knew that Sal was very strong. Perhaps he was not the strongest warrior, nor was he the strongest mage, but in terms of overall combat power, he was one of the best in the tribe. He had not been able to be promoted to a demigod, and he was also dragged down by the tribe's chores. Sal had no distractions, and focused on becoming a demigod. With the will of Azeroth asking for help everywhere, there was a good chance for Sal to pass. Timing was something that could not be missed in minutes. Sal was a dual shaman of enhancement and elemental attributes. If he became a demigod, it would also be very helpful in suppressing the elemental disaster of Azeroth. In addition, the wise Wajin also thought that if for this reason, Sal stepped down from the position of the chieftain of the tribe, it would also be politically a step back. Not only could it avoid the difficulties and accusations of the traditional orcs against Sal, but it could also let the mainstream traditional young orcs try. If it didn't work out, Sal, who had become a demigod, could still come back to preside over the situation. Just like Duke Marcus, the leader of the Alliance, Duque had disappeared more than once, but as long as there was an effective ruling team, the Alliance would not fall into chaos. When he returned as a demigod and regained control of the Alliance with the aura of a king, the Alliance soared again and again. So Sal becoming a demigod was definitely beneficial to the tribe. Now came the problem. If Sal wanted to advance, it would definitely take a long time. Leaving a power vacuum was the stupidest thing to do. Then, who would be suitable to be the next great chieftain? Woken swept his gaze across the audience and suddenly thought of a terrible possibility. Wajin hurriedly asked, "Great Chief, what are you going to do? Although our world is collapsing every day, and we've evacuated most of our people there are still 2/3 of Nagrand left. I plan to use the dark portal to return to Nagrand and ask my grandmother, who refuses to leave Nagrand, and the elementals there for help." "How long?" Kane asked. "A few weeks, a few months, or even a year. I don't know how long an elemental demigod would need. After all, this is a completely unknown field. After all, as far as I know, several demigods in the Alliance are promoted at different times." The air was once again filled with silence. "The tribe cannot be without a leader for a day," Sal emphasized. "Since everyone has no objection to me going to the demigod position, then let's discuss it. Who is the most suitable to be the next great chief of the tribe?" Although it was a discussion and recommendation, it was actually the art of politics. The tribe was first established by the orcs, and at this moment, the largest force in the entire tribe was still the orcs. Whether it was population, combat power, or political influence, the orcs had an absolute advantage. In this political situation, Sal actually had no choice. After a few hypocritical excuses, Thrall finally appointed Gurus Hellscream as the next great chieftain. "Gurus, I'll leave the tribe to you. Unfortunately, because your battle record is not too impressive, I hope that you can launch a Makegara after I announce my abdication, so that all the chiefs who are interested in the position of the great chief can challenge you fairly." "I am deeply honored. Great chieftain, I bet on the name of Gurus Hellscream that I will not lose to any orc in Makara." The chiefs of the other races all noticed that Gurush only mentioned the beast men. Sal patted Gurus on the shoulder and sighed in his heart. He also knew that Gurush was too impulsive and was not a suitable great chieftain. However, he represented the traditional faction, the largest force among the orcs. Secondly, among the younger generation, there was really no other candidate other than him. It was like picking the tallest person among the shortest. It was like trying everything in a desperate situation. Sal was still worried and instructed. "I know you are not ready to be a great chief, but I think Wajin, Kane, and Eitrig will give you a lot of useful advice," Garush interrupted Thrall. "No, I think I am ready. Moreover, no matter how many suggestions there are, isn't the final decision still made by the great chief himself? I think I have the vision to lead the tribe to prosperity." Sal choked on the spot, and even the corners of his eyes twitched. In the end, thousands of words turned into a long sigh, and he lamented in his heart, "As long as Gurus doesn't destroy the tribe." This was helplessness, and it was almost the only choice in a desperate situation. Without saying anything more, Sal patted Gurush's shoulder hard, which could be considered a form of encouragement. The news of Sal's resignation as great chief was also sent to Duque's desk at once. Everyone knew that the so-called Michaela was just a formality. Among the tribe's peers, no one would be able to defeat Gurus. Without waiting for Duque to be nervous, the other alliance leaders quickly made a proposal. An online throne meeting was immediately held. They were all old faces, and the only difference was that Muradin replaced his elder brother and appeared in the illusory projection. What do you think about Gurus Hellscream becoming the new great chief of the tribe? Duque asked. What the hell? That guy has a screw loose. Muradin was the first to complain. I've had enough of this guy in the Northwind Tundra. How stupid is the tribe to elect such a great chief? The leaders of the alliance quickly reached a consensus after talking for a while. Well, since everyone is of the same opinion, from the day Sal entered the dark portal, the alliance will officially launch a cold war against the tribe. Chapter 1764. I'll just quietly watch you show off. I'll never interrupt you. You're brainless and looking for trouble. Duque, the commander of the alliance and demigod of the weave, had once again used an unreliable children's song to make his two daughters giggle. Aurelia could not stand it anymore, and came forward to stop him, who knew that Duque would actually grab her by the waist and carry her to the next room to practice swordsmanship. Ah, you, what time is this? I still have to look after my daughters. Aurelia exclaimed. Don't worry, don't we still have Sasha? Anyway, any one of you can support 2 babies. Duque said shamelessly. Although this was not reliable, it was the truth. Plus, she had been pregnant for quite a long time. No matter how strong Aurelia's maternal instincts were, she was still a woman. The accumulated pressure was released by Duque in a few attacks. Soon, the Windrunner sisters found that Duque was in a particularly good mood. It was rare that he would not let go of them. Obviously, the tribe has changed to a chief who is against the alliance. Why do I feel that you're in a good mood? Sasha asked. Haha, Gurus Hellscream, I prefer to call him Brainless Howl. Sal thought that as long as he was not too wasteful, it would be fine. Even Sal himself probably couldn't imagine how brainless he could be. That is an existence that can constantly refresh a human's understanding of the bottom line of IQ and EQ. Duque held the Windrunner sisters, but let out a smug sneer. It was the smile of a hunter watching his prey foolishly fall into a trap. Sal's judgment of the general trend was indeed not wrong. Azeroth was still in a constant state of trouble, and suffering one disaster after another. Anyway, as long as powerful foreign enemies continued to exist, the alliance would not launch a full-scale war against the tribe. Even if Gurus only had 5 points of intelligence, as long as he was willing to listen to the advice of Wajin and the others, he would fight for benefits and living space for the tribe through friction and confrontation. His reckless and arrogant personality was the best cover. Sal firmly believed that the think tank he left behind could hold the tribe's situation, or at least not collapse. Obviously, Sal had underestimated Garush's recklessness and the alliance's reaction. In the Makara, that was supposed to be a routine event, Garush killed a chieftain from a medium-sized clan, White Eagle, with a single swing of his axe. In the death duel of Makara, it was normal for someone to die. The problem was that the White Eagle chief had laid down his weapon and begged for mercy. According to tradition, surrendering was a great humiliation, but the victor should not humiliate the loser and should spare the other's life. Garush, however, despised the other party for being a coward and still killed him without a care in the world. Then Gurus made a bold statement. If any chieftain other than the beastmen dares to come down, I will kill every single one of them. This undoubtedly cast a dark shadow over Makara. Everyone knew that the leader of the tribe had to be an orc. When Sar established the new tribe, he promised that the chiefs of other races would have the same status as the orc chief. Wasn't Garush slapping him in the face by saying that? Kane, Wajin, and Delano all had ugly expressions on their faces. Makara ended without any suspense. Among the younger generation, only Delano had a chance to defeat Garush. Of course, the young Salyafar wouldn't tear down his father and Sar's stage. As a result, Brainless Roar easily won with a crushing momentum. He succeeded as the Great Chieftain. After officially becoming the Great Chieftain, Wajin's first suggestion was to issue a notice to the Alliance. After all, the Horde and the Alliance were in an alliance, and the Horde also needed the Alliance's food to relieve the refugees. Sending a notice, and hoping that the Alliance would send a king to participate in the Great Chieftain's succession ceremony was etiquette, and a show of respect for the Alliance, who knew that Garush would refuse. I am the Great Chieftain of the Horde. I only need to get the approval of the Beastmen. It has nothing to do with the other races. Nor does it have anything to do with the despicable alliance that once enslaved our compatriots. I didn't immediately start a war to seek justice from that shameless alliance that stole Nascent's land. That's already for the sake of the covenant. His speech, of course, won the cheers of the young beast men, but it made the faces of the chieftains of the major races quite ugly, because he had just scolded the trolls, Taurens, and Forsaken. The few big shots could only stiffen their faces and smile politely, pretending that they had heard wrong. Wajin's heart sank. He vaguely guessed Sar's thoughts. Judging from the results, Sar might have gone overboard. As the contact person who often contacted the Alliance's throne conference, Wajin could only trouble himself to let the troll mage open a portal and go to Stormwind City. The first place Wajin went to was not the Alliance headquarters in Stormwind City, but Duke Marcus Mansion. I came this time to inform the Alliance that our former great chieftain, Sar, decided to go back to Nagran to seek help from the elements in order to figure out the truth of the elemental rebellion. And the new great chieftain Garush Hellscream has officially taken office today. He is the son of Sir Marcus' only beastman general, Grom Hellscream. Wajin had already said it very tactfully. He couldn't say that Sar, in order to avoid the Alliance's monopoly of demigods, ran away to practice, and when he came back, the Alliance would not bully them. Instead, he mentioned Howl's name indifferently and directly pointed out his relationship with Howl. This was the hope that the Alliance would look at the Buddha's face. Who knew? Oh, sorry for troubling Sir Wajin. The Alliance knows. Sir Wajin, you can also go back. Wajin was directly slammed at the door. If it was someone else who treated Wajin like this, Wajin might be able to use his identity to suppress the other party. Unfortunately, it was Vashj who gave him a sanitary eye. The dignified Queen of the Fangs, now the demigod of Lake Azeroth Lordimir Lake, Vashj, dressed in a black and white lace-made dress, guarded the door for Duque. Although it was said that Wajin gave a cold shoulder to a maid, the maid was too awesome. Anyway, Duque was the only one in the world who could let a demigod guard the door. Wajin was still a little unwilling to give up. Excuse me, is Sir Marcus busy now? If you're not busy. Before Wajin finished speaking, he heard Dumuk's unique voice coming from a room not too far upstairs. I'll just quietly watch you. This was an off-key singing. Giggle. This was the laughter of a little girl. Wajin's awkward smile was lost. Vashj crossed her hands, gently pressed them on her lower abdomen, and put on a very formal smile. My master is indeed busy. There are not many important things in the world that are qualified to disturb the master. Even when Neltharion ran out earlier, he only dared to use a substitute to shout a few times. You still have to get out. The subtext was, Wajin should also get out. Wajin could only casually say a few compliments and leave. Chapter 1765. Woken's scalp went numb. As the highest leader of the Alliance, Duque's attitude meant that the upper echelons of the Alliance had reached a consensus. Wajin naturally knew that Gurus had a very bad relationship with several leaders of the Alliance during the northern expedition to No Scent. For example, the few dwarf leaders guarding the Fearless Fortress. From the looks of it, the Alliance's unity against external enemies was quite serious. No, he should have seen through the tribe's clumsy excuse. It was clearly the Alliance who had already informed them that it was the Death Dragon Nesario who had come out to cause trouble. Yet Thrall still used the excuse of confirming the elemental insurrection to abdicate. But when Wajin came, he really couldn't do anything. Because from the beginning to the end, Gurus did not authorize Wajin to invite the leader of the Alliance to attend the succession ceremony of the tribal chief. They didn't even invite the leader of the Alliance, and wanted the elders of the Alliance to give them the cold shoulder. Don't even think about it. Walking out of Duke Marcus' mansion, Woken knew that his efforts this time were mostly in vain. It was like sitting in a carriage and seeing that the carriage was about to crash. There was no way to save it. The only choice left was to jump out of the carriage and defend to reduce the damage. Sigh. After a long sigh, Wajin called out to his troll guards. Let's go to the Storm Fortress to take a look. As expected, he was once again denied entry at Storm Fortress. Our Majesty is busy with state affairs, and has no time to see you. Bolvar for dragon, as the regent of the kingdom in Varian's absence, held enough weight. Unfortunately, there was no sincerity either. Wajin used the teleportation portal of the Alliance and circled around several major cities of the Alliance. Of course, he didn't go to the elves. The High Elves were also known as the Blood Elves. They had fought against the great demons for thousands of years, and the hatred between them was so deep that it could not be dissolved. Even though the Dark Spear Trolls of Woking did not have a direct conflict with the High Elves, racial hatred was just so unreasonable. Who the hell called you a troll? Wajin would not go to Silvermoon City to look for trouble. The only leader he saw was Jaina, who happened to be in Theramore. Jaina's attire was rather formal. She wore an aqua blue mage robe with the glittering Kurtira's crown. Two water elemental elites, who were obviously highly intelligent, stood on both sides of her throne. A female high elven mage was waiting at the side with a faint smile on her lips. When Wajin made the announcement and expressed that the Horde was still on friendly terms with the Alliance, Jaina replied, "The Alliance is never stingy with our friends. When they were hungry, as long as the Alliance had something to eat, they wouldn't starve their friends. When there was trouble, even if it was a disaster that could destroy a planet, the Alliance would send out their entire army to rescue them. However, the Alliance doesn't mind slaughtering and roasting wild boars that wander into the crops." This was already a slap in the face. Woking felt his face burning. Let's not talk about the grudges between the Alliance and the Horde during the first and second Dark Portal. After the Horde went west to the Kalimdor continent, the Alliance was very kind. Facing an enemy that could destroy the world, the Alliance knew their priorities very well. When the Horde was in trouble, as an ally, the Alliance was not stingy with their resources. The wood used to build the city of Orgrim was transported from the Elven Forest. When the Horde was famished, it was the Alliance who sold a small amount of food to the Horde to tide over the difficulties. When the Draenor evil orcs fell into madness, it was the Alliance who provided support such as holy water and food, allowing Sal to save his compatriots. When the Draenor Day was about to be destroyed, it was the Alliance who provided a large number of transport ships to rescue the 2 million orcs, who were gradually lacking in resources and falling into despair. If it weren't for the bloodiest war between the two sides, the Alliance would have enslaved the orcs. If it weren't for the huge differences in appearance and culture between the two sides, maybe the Alliance and the Horde would have become a unified organization instead of being independent and wary of each other as they were now. Wajin argued with an almost argumentative tone. The Horde is also very difficult, and Gurus is still young. It's inevitable that he's young. However, he's still growing rapidly. The Horde doesn't want Chief Gurus's previous unpleasant experience with the Alliance to extend to the present. Jaina raised her eyebrows. "Oh? Is that so? But I know that Sal is actually younger than Garush." Wajin was speechless on the spot. This was because of seniority. Sal debuted very early, and as the founder of the new Horde, he was brothers with the older generation of Horde leaders, such as Varric and Grom. As a last resort, he could only call Gurus young man. Wajin could only blush. I mean, he's slightly young as a leader, but the Horde is established through force. As the winner of Makara, it's glorious for him to become the Horde's great chief. The Alliance doesn't care who the Horde's great chief is. That's our attitude. If we can talk, we talk. If we don't want to talk, we don't have to talk. Anyway, the Alliance will continue to implement the trade contract signed with the Horde until the contract expires, or the Horde unilaterally tears up the contract. After saying that, Jaina waved her hand. "I still have official business to deal with. I won't see you out." Without waiting for Wajin to say anything else, she flashed away and left the living room. This was Jaina's Mage Tower, and Jaina could freely travel to any place in the Mage Tower. Wajin left Jaina's Mage Tower. He took the opportunity to observe Theramore. He was shocked to find that the Alliance had begun to unabashedly prepare for war. Civilians were lining up to evacuate Theramore by boat, and a layer of armor-like things were being added to the strengthened walls. More anti-aircraft cannons were being installed on the walls. The only thing that made Wajin feel a little lucky was that he didn't see any heavy cannons. Most of the cannons installed by the Alliance were fast-firing, not large-caliber heavy cannons. This meant that the Alliance was guarding against the Horde's possible human wave tactics. But they had no intention of attacking, because to blow up Orgrimmar's walls strengthened by multiple layers of magic arrays, heavy cannons of more than 200 millimeters were necessary. Wajin still couldn't relax. With the mobilization and transportation capabilities of the Alliance would be able to transport the largest artillery to Duroder within a week even without the use of the teleportation portal. Damn it, the Alliance's reaction is more intense than I thought. This was the Alliance's deterrence and warning. After Wajin returned to the Horde in disgrace, he almost joined forces with Kane and Delano to put pressure on the Horde to dispel the furious Gurus's idea of going to war against the Alliance. As a result, while Sal was seeking elemental support, Gurus started the war. But the target was changed to Feralas in the southwest of the Kalimdor continent. This used to be a paradise for neutral ogres and some slave merchants. In the Hammer of Doom, the merchants there even let Varian be a slave gladiator for a long time. When Sal was in office, he never touched these neutral forces. Garush, on the other hand, directly attacked them. Chapter 1766. When Duque heard that Garush was attacking the neutral forces, Duque, who had snuck into Theramor's camp, laughed. Is the world black and white? Duque asked Jaina, who was sitting opposite him. I used to think so. But now. Jaina shook her head. That Garush is just as you said. He's quite retarded. Duque raised his hand, and Solarian poured Duque a glass of red wine. Duque gently swirled the glass, letting the aroma of the red wine waft out. Anyone, any race, whatever they do in the world will be remembered. If this was a world dominated by a single race, perhaps it would be better. Unfortunately, neither the humans nor the orcs are in control of hegemony in Azeroth. It's not impossible to wage war against the neutral forces and races just for the survival of the race. Jaina smiled. However, it will be difficult to attract more races to join the Horde in the future. Just like how the Alliance was never an organization made up of only one race, the Horde was the same. Simply killing would not make more races support the Horde, and it would even alienate the other races in the Horde. The brainless Roar seemed to be using the most desired war of the younger generation of orcs to obtain the land and resources they desired through conquest. However, these barbarians did not even care about the shamans, nor did they have the concept of sustainable use of resources. Now is not the time. Garush has not broken the hearts of the other chiefs. Let's focus on solving the internal problems first. Ask Kale that's to go to Grim Battle. Ask Bulang to bring the Second Alliance Air Fleet to cooperate with the Red Dragon Army and the Wildhammer Dwarves. Grim Battle was an abandoned fortress in the east of the wetlands. Its history could be traced back to the Dwarven War of the Three Hammers. It was a fortress city built by the defeated Wildhammer Dwarves. Although the Wildhammer Dwarves won the subsequent raid by the Dark Iron Dwarves, Tharisan's wife, Empress Morgard, died in the Battle of Grimbator. Before she died, she gave Grimbator an eternal curse. The Wildhammer Dwarves eventually fled their cursed home, never to return, and moved to Eagle's Nest Mountain. During World War II at the Dark Portal, this place was once used by the Dragonmaw clan orcs under the guidance of Deathwing as a base to imprison the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza and train the tribe's Red Dragon cavalry here. Duque had saved the Red Dragon Queen, who had almost been tortured like a dog, and forged a deep friendship with her. After World War II, the area was practically abandoned. The dwarves were unwilling to take this fortress that had no resources and no real significance. In the end, only the Red Dragon army left behind a few adult red dragons to guard the place. With the arrival of the Cataclysm, Deathwing reappeared in Azeroth, and the Twilight Hammer disciples who were wanted by the Alliance all over the world had already been killed. However, with the support of the Black Dragon army, the Twilight Hammer worked together to drive away the Red Dragons here. They transformed the stone hall built by the dwarves into a training ground. So Grimbator had to fight again. However, this level of trouble was not worth the Alliance's hero squad. Jaina, although I don't think Gurus has the guts to attack the Alliance now, you'd better stay in Theramore, Duque ordered. Yo, I'm facing an army of 2 million orcs. What if I can't hold it? Jaina joked. Why don't you transfer Naxxramas to the top of Theramore's head for me? Pfft. Duque laughed shamelessly. At that time, the Horde will really have to go to war with the Alliance. Don't you want to? Jaina's bright eyes were full of a faint smile. Duque knew that this was also a test. Hey, I'm your man. Is it necessary to test me like this? Duque raised his hand in surrender. I wonder which fiancé threw me into the ice and snow of the Tirisful woodland and let me experience the cruelty of the orcs? Jaina teased. As smart as she was, it was impossible for her not to know Duque's intentions. At that time, she might have been confused for a while, but after carefully experiencing it later, she would definitely figure it out. Will you hate me for this? Duque asked. Jaina shrugged and spread her hands, pretending to be helpless. Then she sat over and leaned against Duque, her nimble and white fingers drawing circles on Duque's chest. Jaina's voice was faint. If I really hated you, I wouldn't have been willing to follow you for so many years without a title, and even be willing to bear your children. It's just that I never understood why you made me hostile to the orcs at the expense of scaring me back then. Later, after the Horde went west, you were so tolerant of the Horde, even a little indulgent with Sal? I almost thought you had changed, or maybe you weren't you. Duque inserted his fingers into Jaina's fluffy golden hair and stroked it lovingly. I'm sorry. From the past until now, I have always hoped that the Horde will completely withdraw from the stage of history. But what happened later? First, it was because of the situation. The enemies that were more ferocious than the Horde came wave after wave. Second, it could be said that I felt the guidance of fate. Fate was simply metaphysics. It could be said that it existed, but it could also be unreliable. However, Duque had been right for so many years that Jaina had long been convinced. She had to believe it even if she didn't want to. What about this time? Jaina caressed Duke's face and blew into Duel's ear. This girl was clearly using her womanhood to her advantage. Duque was speechless. If it weren't for the fact that this girl had been his sword practice partner for many years, eating her up, brainwashing and instigating her, and achieving the unlocking of all the postures, she would have been completely obedient to him. She even bought the ticket for the ship. Duke might really think that she was that girl who sold her father in history. It's not the right time. It wasn't that he didn't want revenge, it was just that it wasn't the right time yet. Jaina was exceptionally intelligent and understood immediately. Hey, since it's not the right time, why did you still want me to come to the front lines? What if I can't escape? Jaina started to act spoiled. Duque, completely helpless, he could only smile bitterly as he took out a seemingly perfect gem and gave it to Jaina. Wow, it's so beautiful. The energy of this thing. No wonder Jaina was so shocked. This thing looked perfect at first, like the eyeball of a blue dragon. As a radiant moon mage, Jaina immediately sensed the terrifying energy contained within it as soon as she touched it, as well as the astonishing Titan runic magic formation. This is, you can call it, mass-produced focusing rainbow. Focusing rainbow? Mass-produced? What the hell was this? Chapter 1767. Focusing Rainbow. As the most powerful arcane energy in Azeroth, the Titans gave the Blue Dragons a magical artifact to control magic. It helped Malygos the Hairweaver manage the magic of Azeroth. If necessary, it could even absorb the arcane energy of the entire Azeroth, but this would make it extremely unstable. Once it exploded, it would be enough to blow up the entire Azeroth into a second Outland. In the original history, in the next important time node, Pandaria's Mystery, Gurus Hellscream used the Blue Dragon artifact, Focusing Rainbow, to condense a magic bomb, and threw it over to destroy Theramore like a nuclear bomb. In order to save Jaina, Ronan, the exemplary character of human lousy promotion, sacrificed his life. This is one of the greatest crimes of Garish in history, and because Theramore, which had been operating for decades, was destroyed, Jaina's hair turned white overnight, and she became an extremely extreme, almost crazy person. She was blinded by hatred, and became unable to see the general situation. Even when she returned to the Dalijan Kirin Tor assembly, she tried her best to advocate ignoring foreign enemies and directly declaring war on the Horde. She was just short of being further corrupted in the game, and then being pushed down as a boss in a dungeon. However, in this life, Gurus still wanted to play with the nuclear bomb. Focusing rainbow? He had to ask Duque first. This is a mass-produced version of focusing rainbow. It's a bit like a small magic net, and can absorb all arcane energy within a 30-mile radius. You can set the time when it releases the energy again. That is, when you throw it out, it will explode in about a few seconds, Duque said seriously. Power. If it's just this operation, it can probably flatten 1/10 of Theramore. When Duque said this, Jaina's expression suddenly changed. Theramore was quite huge. After 11 years of construction with the full support of the Alliance, Theramore was a full 10 kilometers long and wide, which was 100 square kilometers. Blowing up 10 square kilometers at once was definitely more powerful than all the cannons of today, and even the main magic cannons of the Dalijan. Jaina noticed the other meaning in Duque's words. Then what about the other operation? Connect to the magic net and draw in a large amount of arcane energy for a short period of time. In theory, it can cause an even more powerful explosion, but the duration of the explosion will become uncontrollable, and it will cause part of the weave to collapse. Duque shrugged. Unless you're planning to die with your enemy, please don't play this game. You're not immortal. When Jaina heard the first half of Duque's sentence, she was so scared that her face turned pale. However, she soon felt Duque's concern and deep love. With this, even if Gurus brought his entire tribe to Dustwallow Swamp, he still wouldn't be able to take down Theramore. No, it should be said that even if they succeeded, they would vomit 18 liters of blood. Woo-woo. Master, your disciple is becoming more and more fond of you. What should we do? After saying that, Jaina immediately offered artificial respiration. Duque accepted it calmly and handed the mass-produced focusing rainbow to Jaina. This thing is for you to protect yourself. Although it can be mass-produced, it's best not to use it. After all, the material of this thing was too bad. Anyway, you know it's related to the blue dragon's body. Jaina stuck out her tongue. Was this considered as no trade, no killing? After making arrangements with Jaina, Duque passed through the portal and went directly to Dawn Island in the middle of Lordemere Lake. As soon as he stepped out of the portal, Duque saw that Vasht was already in the form of a Naga, waiting respectfully with a group of subordinates. On the shore, there was the giant water elemental Lord Unstable Hydus, the male Naga Deepwater Lord Karathres, and the deep-sea giant Morogar Tidewalker. In the deep water a little further from the shore, there was the huge island-like fish-shaped monster Jisra, with most of its body exposed. They were all the bosses in Draenor's Serpent Temple back then. Now that their fate had changed, they had followed Vasht and become the vassal forces of the Alliance. Looking out, the elite Naga guards and Naga priests were lined up densely in the distance. Further away, there were countless Murlocs. These guys, who used to quarrel all day, were all quietly crawling in front of Duque. Sometimes, Duque couldn't help but sigh that fate made fools of people. However, it was because of Duque's constant stirring up trouble that those forces that were originally destroyed, and the bosses that were destined to step into death, were all pulled back to become his subordinates. This was why the Alliance was strong and prosperous today. In the future, when fighting against the Burning Legion that came again, they would have more confidence. Duque took a deep breath. Although he was already a demigod, and breathing was just an action that could not be done, he always retained the habits of being a human. Duque believed that only humans were the true saviors of this world. He spat out the foul air in his lungs and said loudly, "Everyone from the Storm Naga, I have saved you from death. I have given you a future and hope. But this is not without conditions. I think you know what I am here to do today." The Deepwater Lord Karathres took the lead, knelt on one knee and shouted, "I am willing to die for Master Duke Marcus." All the lords, all the elites, and thousands of aquatic powerhouses knelt down in unison. "I am willing to die for Master Duke Marcus." Death was not just a simple fanaticism. In a sense, This was a more transcendent existence, a more ideal destination. Every single one of them had personally witnessed how the dead humans and powerful creatures had fused with the weave and become immortal existences. For example, the frost dragon Saffron, the Archbishop of Holy Light Alonso's fail, mortals and things would eventually die or decay. Being loyal to their own demigod Vashj and Vashj's master, Duque, was the true way of kings. Therefore, the loyalty of these aquatic powerhouses who had changed their name to Storm Naga was not false. Seeing the fanaticism in these guys' eyes, Duque was quite satisfied. Very good. Now the world has changed. The water elemental plane is the plane closest to Azeroth. I can feel that the water elemental Lord Tidehunter Neptulin did not personally participate in this world-destroying operation. He is destined to be a thorn in Netherio's side. Perhaps he will be in big trouble. Perhaps he wants to remain neutral, or he is purely acting according to circumstances. At this point Duque paused, then continued. The Alliance needs to unite more powerhouses to fight against evil. What you have to do is to persuade him. Use words or force to persuade him to join this war against Netherio. Suddenly, the unstable Hedis asked in a muffled voice, "What if he refuses?" Chapter 1768. Was it another black and white issue? Duque had a slightly strange expression on his face. That's not important. If he refuses to participate in the war against Netherio, then make him hand over part of his water elemental authority to Vashj. Let Vashj fight in his place. I think if he was rescued from a desperate situation, he would be very happy to do so. When Duque said this, all the members of the Storm Naga clan understood. They could not let the Tidehunters kneel, but if this coward refused to work, then they would squeeze him dry. Vashj swayed her snake tail and came in front of Duque. She crossed her 3 pairs of arms in front of her chest and bowed. "My master, Vashj will obey your orders." Duque did not say much, and Vashj also understood what Duque meant. Anyway, as long as Neptulin was not beaten into a dog, Vashj did not have to do anything. Duque pressed his hands on Vashj's shoulders, and Vashj's body suddenly trembled. After following Duque for so long, she of course knew that Duque did not like non-humanoid monsters. She was also disgusted with her Naga form. But she had no choice. If she did not appear in the form of a Naga, it would be difficult to convince the Nagas and sea monsters under her. Duque rarely touched her body in the Naga form. Duque was willing to press her slippery, scaly shoulders, largely because of what he was about to say next. "I'm going back to Vashj. Are you all right?" "Yes, I'm fine." The only part of Vashj's body that did not turn back into a Naga was her head. Her smooth white face leaned down and pressed against the back of Duque's right hand. She intimately rubbed it a few times. "I am both Vashj and Master Saleya. Both of them are me. And it is because of Master that I did not go crazy during those long dark times." With the destruction of the Well of Eternity, the city of the High Elves, Vaskr, sank into the sea. Elven Queen Azhara and her High Elven followers could not escape this catastrophe. Although they escaped death, the price of their lives was in Zoth, turning them into terrifying Naga sirens. Now, time had washed away the history of the High Elves. Many people had already forgotten this painful lesson. But Vashj was definitely an exception. Back then, the Lord of Vashjur's city had been her mother, Lysariel Vashjur. Because of her mother, she was able to enter the Azhara Palace and serve Queen Azhara, becoming the queen's maid. After Vashjur sank to the bottom of the sea with Azhara City, Vashjur had been Vashjur's territory for the past 10,000 years, until she led the Naga of her clan to seek refuge with Illidan. This time, following the Great Cataclysm, the water elemental plane in Azeroth's greatest overlap was Vashjur. This caused the water elemental in Vashjur to riot and produce a terrifying resonance. It passed through the abyss of the sea and reverberated throughout the world of Azeroth for a long time. To solve the problem of Vashjur, there was no one more suitable than Vashjur and her Storm Naga. Perhaps there had been other Naga clans who did not have eyes and came to take over. But as a demigod, everything would be easily solved. Through the almost non-existent plane barrier near Vashjur, they could reach the throat of the abyss. The throat of the abyss was an ocean located in the elemental plane. It was the source of all water elemental, and the territory of the water elemental lord Neptulon. It was constantly brewing, and using waves and storms to attack the land that was surrounded by it. Normally, unless mortals relied on special methods, they would not be able to get close to this godforsaken place. The Naga were originally aquatic creatures, but it was different. Without a doubt, this was their backyard. Duque sent the storm Naga there, so it was safe. Suleika, remember safety first. Yes. After saying goodbye softly, thousands of Naga and Murlocs jumped into the water under Vashtor's lead. The entire sea was filled with bubbles from the rapid diving of these aquatic creatures. 10 minutes later, the entire island suddenly became empty. That was not entirely true. At least, the Murloc prophet Magar had stayed. As the leader of hundreds of thousands of Murlocs, he was already Vashtor's other deputy, and his position was only below the Deepwater Lord Carithres. Look after Lordimir Lake. Understood. My master. Magar bowed deeply to Duque. A day later, in the deep sea northwest of Stormwind City, a huge army arrived at Vashtor. Vashtor swayed her snake tail and came to a seemingly ordinary high platform. She raised her hand and gently wiped off the thick moss on a stone tablet. If not for her actions, anyone would think that this stone tablet was an ordinary deep-sea stone. When she finished wiping the stone tablet, she was shocked to see that the stone tablet was written in the High Elven language. This tablet commemorates the benevolent leader, our beloved Lady Lisserel Vashtor. For 100 years, she has guided the people of the glimmering city Vashtor into an era of endless prosperity. May she and her daughter, the dazzling Lady Vashtor, continue to illuminate the way forward for our people in the darkness for the next 100 years. Vashtor seemed to be muttering to herself. It was the Naga's special sound wave language underwater. My master, the one who truly illuminates the way forward in the darkness is you, not me. And Vashtor is my surname, not my name. My name. Forget it. From the day you saved me, I am Vashtor Eubateria Vashtor. Vashtor smiled gracefully, and then there was no trace of a smile on her face. She raised her trident high and pointed it forward. Storm Naga. Attack. Destroy all who resist. The queen's clear voice spread throughout the dark underwater world. Beside her, Carithres, who was even more burly, raised his weapon. Attack. Destroy all who resist. Tell those thieves who is Vashtor's master. Attack. Thousands of voices responded. They converged into one, and then turned into an incomparably huge war machine, beginning to rush into every corner of the underwater city of Vashtor. The surrounding water constantly fluctuated greatly. With the scouring of the underwater turbulence, there were red waves everywhere. Vashtor was like this. Just like her current position, she did not participate in the battle. She stood on the triangular roof of the tallest temple in this underwater city, ostentatiously displaying her divine power fluctuations. She was declaring her ownership of this underwater city, and also longing for a challenger with enough weight to appear. Unfortunately, there was none. The one who occupied this place was merely a second-rate Naga clan. She did not even need to do anything. Yesler had already swallowed the guy whose name it did not even know into its stomach. Chapter 1769. Duque realized that he was actually a bit like a superstar, going to one show after another. In fact, Duque should be happy. His subordinates were strong, and they did not have their own masters, but rather, they had their own goals. Moreover, the emergence of more peerless powerhouses was a preview of the full-blown war when the Burning Legion invaded in the future. After all this time, Nesario, Alakir, and Ragnaros had come together. 10 years ago, all three of them would have been big bosses that could destroy the world. If he were to gather all the elites together and defeat the enemies one by one like in the past, it would mean that he would let the other two go. Unfortunately, no matter which one he let go of, it would cause unimaginable destruction and destruction to Azeroth. Splitting up to fight against the enemy was already inevitable. No matter how reluctant Duque was, he had to start learning to let go. And the biggest difference from history was that the Alliance now had the capital to split up. When Duque rushed to Silvermoon City, he happened to run into the elves' farewell party for Queen Sylvanas. This time, Sylvanas' target was the Wind Elemental Lord, Alakir. Just as Sylvanas was about to push open the door to the farewell party hall, Duque arrived. "Yo Duque, we sisters almost thought that the three of us combined couldn't compare to your maid." Queen Sylvanas teased Duque. That's right. At this moment, beside Queen Sylvanas were Aurelia and Sasha, who were dressed in military attire and ready to go to war. The three Windrunner sisters had not gone to war for a long time. He had to admit that the physique of the elves was against the rules. After Aurelia and Sasha gave birth to a daughter, not only did their figure not change, but their breasts were also a grade bigger. Seeing this, the other women around Duke were all envious and jealous. Duque was drooling. Unfortunately, women like the three Windrunner sisters were destined to put the survival of the world as their top priority. They were leading by example, shouldering the future of the entire elven race with their seemingly thin and weak shoulders. Even though Duque didn't think that they were the kind of wife and loving mother, he knew from the first day he started dating them. His daughter wasn't even a year old yet, and they had already chosen to fight. This kind of courage, should he say that it was no wonder their surname was Windrunner? Duque shrugged in the face of Queen Syriana's teasing. Then, he went over to each of them and gave them a hug and a kiss. After a long kiss, Aurelia raised her eyebrows and smiled. "How surprising. I thought you would use her as an excuse to stop me. Your name is Windrunner, not Canary. When I first met you, I seemed to see a high-spirited warhorse that was eager to enter the battlefield. Why did I have to bind a gust of wind if it was foolish? I'm already very sorry that I've used my child to hold you back for 2 years. Humph. It's good that you know." Sasha pouted. She looked very cute when she was angry. "Duque, don't you have anything to tell us?" Queen Syriana asked with her arms akimbo and her chest puffed out. "Don't be stopped by trash like Alakir. Back then, Sargeras had defeated all the ancient gods and elemental lords. And our future enemy is destined to be Sargeras, who has returned from the bottomless abyss." Duque wasn't looking down on the enemy, but it was a disguised form of encouragement. Al-Akir was strong, but he wasn't the final destination of the three Windrunner sisters. He was just a mountain that they would pass by. Only Sargeras was the real destination that everyone had to work hard to cross. The three Windrunner sisters said in unison, "We understand." Queen Syriana held Duque's arm as they walked out of the farewell hall. In the past, countless elves used to look at Duke with envy and even hatred, as he was the man who had taken away their queen's body and mind. However, as Duke became a demigod, all the jealousy and hatred disappeared, and all that was left was admiration. That kind of formulaic speech couldn't attract Duque's attention. Although the elves were applauding and cheering for Queen Syriana's speech, Duque's mind had already flown to the southernmost part of the Tanaris Desert, Uldum. There were a total of 3 Titan bases on planet Azeroth. The other 2 were Uldaman in the Barren Land, and Uldur in Northrend's Storm Peak. Mortals knew the most about Uldaman. It was the place where the Titans created the ancestors of the dwarves, rockjaws, and earth spirits. It was because the earth spirits were cursed with flesh and blood that the dwarves of today came into being. Otter was the place where the Titans left the guardians on the continent of Azeroth lived. It was once filled with the storm giants and their slaves, the crystal puppets. It was also dominated by the ancient god Yogg-Saron. With the battle of the allied forces, Uldur had been liberated. Even the guardian dragons and the Titan guardians knew very little about Uldur. With the consent of the guardian Torim, the leader of the alliance was able to ask Uldur's central computer again. According to Uldur's records, it was confirmed that Uldur used to be the Titans' climate research center in the world of Azeroth. And perhaps it still was. It might still contain the blueprints of the Titans' transformation of the world, including mountains, rivers, seas, and all kinds of creatures. Before the cataclysm, the Titans set up an extremely complicated and powerful Titan barrier for the entire Uldur. Even the Titan guardians themselves could not enter it. But with the collapse of the Azeroth elemental barrier, Uldur became accessible for the first time in 25,000 years. For Nesario, who was keen on creating new species of dragons, such as the Twilight Dragon, There was mysterious information he could not refuse. There were a total of 3 core areas in Ulder. One was the Hall of Origins, that had mastered the mysterious power of the Titans. Due to Duque's special instructions, the archaeological team belonging to Bulang Bronzebeard had gone deep into the Hall of Origins of Ulder as soon as possible after the cataclysm. According to the preliminary reports, this pyramid covered in sand and gravel was a place that archaeologists dreamed of. Precious ancient relics and terrifying automatic defense systems could be seen everywhere. But according to the ancient language on the stone tablets discovered at this stage, archaeologists suddenly discovered that there was an even more important treasure hidden in these halls. A secret that could threaten the entire Azeroth. A weapon of mass destruction that could recreate all life in Azeroth. The leaders of the Alliance believed that the invaders of Ulder, led by Nesario, obviously knew this secret and hoped to use this treasure as a weapon. Finding and protecting the Hall of Origins was no longer just an academic need. Chapter 1770. Therefore Brian Bronzebeard, Illyria, Riataline, Hadron Brightwing, and Millhouse Manastorm would be in charge of the path in the Hall of Origins. These 5 hero-level powerhouses were Brian Bronzebeard, Illyria, Riataline, Hadron Brightwing and Millhouse. In the Uldum region, there was also a new race, the Catmen. During the creation of the world, the Titans also created a mysterious race, the Catmen Torville. They were used to guard the Titans' research facility in Uldum, and Torville's lost city was where they once lived and fought. But with the appearance of the wind elemental plane, Torville, which was the closest to them, naturally became their first target to conquer the world. The main opponents in the Torville dungeon were the Catmen General and the spiritual leader, but the final opponent was the culprit sent by the Wind Elemental Lord to bewitch the Torville's Hiamat. Torville's lost city was the stronghold of Nephiselt. Nephiselt was one of the Catmen Torvilles, and the flesh curse had turned their stone skin into flesh. In fact, almost as soon as the cataclysm happened, Deathwing's forces infiltrated Uldum faster than the dwarven archaeologists. Torville swore allegiance to Deathwing in exchange for a chance to remove the flesh curse. After signing a dark contract with Deathwing and his army, Nephiselt Torville, who had regained their stone skin, retreated to their ancient capital, the Lost City, in the Venel River Delta, and continued to threaten the entire Uldum. However, after the curse was lifted, the gang of Torwills turned around to bite back at their benefactor. Even so, because Nephiselt had already signed a dark contract, the distortion and malice in them could never be removed. The Lost City was easy to defend and difficult to attack. The periphery was surrounded by steep mountains and swamps filled with crocodiles. Even if there was no garrison in the city, it was difficult to invade. What was worse was that the commander of Nephiselt was Lord Southwind, Hiamat, who had given them new power. She was one of the most powerful servants under Deathwing and Alakir. Even though he was a powerful enemy and an unshakable general, the fact that Hiamat appeared in the Lost City might also be an opportunity. After strengthening a large number of troops and corrupting Nephiselt, he did not have much power left. A truly powerful team of heroes might be able to sneak into the city and assassinate Lord Southwind before he recovered his power. This task was given to Sasha. She would team up with Merritt, Vanessa, Sally Whitemane and Solarian, the great astrologer, in order to complete the mission quickly. The teams formed by these 2 groups of heroes were just side divisions. Their main force was still dealing with the Wind Elemental Lord Alakir. If Alakir was at his peak, Duque wouldn't have dared to let Queen Sylvie face him. In fact, after the World War 25,000 years ago, whether it was the 4 great ancient gods or the 4 elemental lords, after they died once, they were no longer as brave as they were in the past. Thus Duque sent out Servanas, Gavin Rad and Stormwarden Amaron. The 3 of them would head straight for the Wind God throne located in the void southwest of Uldum. In the past, the Wind God throne only existed in the Wind Elemental Plane. It was the lair of the Wind Elemental Lord Alakir, floating high in the endless sky wall. Now the barrier of the Elemental Plane had been broken. In order to prevent Alakir from wandering freely in the wind of Azeroth, It was a good idea to take the initiative to attack. Otherwise, when Al-Akir tamed all the winds in the southern sky of Kalimdor and gathered the fiercest storm, it would be too late. His appetite couldn't be too small. Obviously, cleansing all life in Uldum and occupying the mysterious Titan creation, the Hall of Origins, would only be his starting point. When he and Ragnaros each controlled all the wind and fire elements in Azeroth, that would be the real world-destroying cataclysm. Even without Nesario, who controlled the earth elements taking action, they alone could destroy all the creatures in Azeroth. Flames burned everything. Strong winds suffocated all living things. Duque had already tested it. In this fantasy world, the wind element was a special element that included air. Taking away the wind element would also mean taking away the air. Any creature that had to breathe was dead. Strong winds alone weren't enough. After all, there were things like the Undying and ghosts in this world. Don't forget that there were also flames. If Ragnaros really attacked without limit, even the Undying would be finished. Duque let out a long sigh of relief. While he was thinking, Queen Sylvanas had also completed the declaration before the expedition. After all, it was not an expedition of an army, and there was no grand military parade. After Queen Sylvanas announced the various appointments, she once again appointed Theron as the regent and officially set off. In front of hundreds of elves, Sylvanas gave a hot kiss without hesitation. "Don't worry, my dear. I'll deal with Al-Akir and come back to give birth." Duque grimaced and lamented in his heart, "Son, or rather daughter, you have a mother who dares to fight and fight. I really don't know if you're lucky or unlucky." What else could Duque say to such a tough Queen Sylvanas? He could only roll his eyes. It's good to get it done before the Burning Legion fully invades. Those who had stepped into the divine realm were so capricious. As long as they were given enough divinity and energy, giving birth was more like a process of splitting elements or powers. Duque estimated that Queen Sylvanas did not even have to suffer the pain of childbirth and could directly give birth without pain. Other women probably wouldn't be able to enjoy such a 666 method. The women of the Windrunner family had always been swift and decisive. They did not have too many romantic feelings, and did what they had to do. During peacetime, when they were bored, perhaps they could roll in bed with Duque every day. Even as a queen, they could completely unlock all the positions. Once they entered the war, these gentle, beautiful, and sexy female elves would transform into the most heroic rangers and fight on the front line against evil. Without looking back, they stepped into the portal that Duque opened and went to meet Gavin Rad and the others. Duque sighed softly and then bitterly rushed to the next battle, Teldrassil. This was because another traitor had finally surfaced. In the third battle and the Battle of Hyjal, the Night Elves lost their world tree, Nordrassil, and thus their immortality. The generous Night Elves could accept this fact. However, the human heart was always the most complicated thing. Once you had it, you would not be willing to lose it. Under such circumstances, Fandral Staghelm convinced the other Night Elves and finally united with the Druids to create a new world tree, Teldrassil. Chapter 1771. Originally, Fandral did not have the final say in the Cenarian Circle. Unfortunately, Malfurion, who could keep Fandral in check, entered the Emerald Dream after the Battle of Mount Hyjal. No one knew the reason, and no one knew how to wake him up again. Naturally, Fandral replaced him and became the Archdruid. Without Malfurion's interference, Fandral could do whatever he wanted. Since ancient times, the Druids and the Cenarian Circle formed by the Druids had never been under the jurisdiction of the royal authority or any other regime. Even though Tyrande was the spokesperson of the divine authority among the Night Elves, and held the highest authority among the Night Elves, she had no right to stop Fandral's actions. Without Malfurion, the only one who had the ability to stop Fandral was the former Druid mentor, the halfling Cenarius. Coincidentally, Grom had chopped the shit out of him with his axe. Moreover, most of the Night Elves yearned for immortality again. Tyrande could only acquiesce. However, even though the New World Tree grew rapidly, and the incomparably gigantic thickets could be seen from the northern coast of Kalimdor, the Night Elves settled down here, and began to build their first new city in thousands of years. All of this was not as perfect as Fandral had imagined. The night elves did not regain the ability to live forever. It was very simple. Teldrassil did not receive the blessings from the dragon kings like Nordrassil. After all, Alexstras's blessing was to protect the safety of the Well of Eternity. Now the new Well of Eternity had exploded. The cruel reality had proven that the night elves did not have the ability to protect the Well of Eternity alone. And there was no need to protect the new Well of Eternity. Therefore, there was no need to renew the benefits of immortality for the night elves. As a result, Teldrassil began to gradually decay. Satyrs, inferior demons, and other monsters also began to treat this place as their home. After Duque sent Queen Sylvanas off, Duque received a message from Tyrant. As soon as Duque stepped out of the portal in the Elun temple, Tyrant came to greet him. Dressed in a moon-white priestess robe, Tyrant looked so holy. At this moment, she was the most devout priestess of the goddess. The signs you spoke of have indeed appeared. Tyrant looked worried. Fandral has summoned many druids to Teldrassil in preparation for the plan to heal the World Tree. Navarax, Brawl Bearskin, Hamel Rintotem, and other great druids have all received his summons. He summoned the druids in the name of the Cenarian Council's chairman. I feel that there is something wrong, but I have no right to stop him. You said that when this happens, I have to inform you immediately. As one of William's trio, Brawl was the chief druid of the Alliance's hero group, so there was no need to introduce him. Navarax had long ago, druid of druids of druids of. Long before Sar led the orcs west to the Kalimdor continent, a group of claw druids discovered a complex underground cave in the heart of the Barren Lands. At that time, as the leader of this group of druids, Night Elf Navarax firmly believed that as long as he could connect to the Emerald Dream in the cave, he could transfer the energy of the dream to the spring in the cave and restore the Barren Lands to its former glory. However, Navarax's imagination had unfortunately turned into a nightmare, and the Howling Caves had also changed. There were venomous snakes, velociraptors, wind snakes, and crocodiles everywhere. The springs and crevices had also rotted. In a sense, this guy was a troublemaker with good intentions. Hammer Rintotem was the chief of the Tarn Rintotem family, the disciple of Malfurion Stormrage, and the advisor of Cairn Bloodhoof. In the future, he would also become the advisor of Cairn's son Smashbane. He was also the first non-dream elf druid to receive the title of Great Druid. Although Hammer was not the first Tarn druid, he was indeed the first Tarn druid to regain the way of nature. Fandral had summoned so many great druids in one go. Duque gently stroked Tyrant's green hair. Don't worry, you did well. It's time to deal with Fandral's Staghelm. Please call the core members of the Elun Sisterhood, Chandri's Feathermoon, and other important elven generals. Also, be prepared to communicate with Elun at any time. Come with me. Tyrant immediately realized that the situation was far more serious than she had imagined. Duque must have sensed something. Can you tell me who the enemy is this time? Tyrant asked with a straight face. The King of Nightmares, Savis. Upon hearing this name, Tyrant could not help but reminisce about the darkest times. In a sense, it was Savis who had followed Queen Azhara's orders to seek a higher level of power and life in the universe. That was how he had formed a connection with the Burning Legion, and that ancient war that could be said to be a catastrophe for the entire planet of Azeroth. However, Savis, the Night Elves' known sycophant, had finally escaped and obtained a new life under the hands of the ancient god Inzos. He became the virus, cancer, mastermind, and culprit that invaded the Emerald Dream. For the past 10,000 years, Isra, who monitored and controlled the Emerald Dream, had always hoped to catch him, but to no avail. He was too cunning, and almost no matter what he did not reveal his true form. No matter what methods Isra used to ambush or lure him, the most he could do was capture some of the fragments of his will. However, he used the unreal nature of the Emerald Dream to continuously infiltrate the dreams of the guardians of the Emerald Dream, invading and corroding the green dragons. Not long ago, a large number of ancient dragons had almost fallen from the Emerald Dragon army. For example, after the Molten Core, There had almost been a repeat of the 4 great green dragons that had fallen. If not for Duque's warning to Isra, the Green Dragon army would have lost a few ancient dragons that could fight. Hearing Savi's name, Tyron's expression turned ugly. I think we need to find a way to wake Malfurion up. This had nothing to do with personal feelings. It was purely because Malfurion, who controlled the power of the Emerald Dream, was an ideal candidate to fight against Savi's. Tyron bit her lip and seemed to hesitate, but still said, Duque, don't you know soul magic? I agree with you using it on Malfurion. Duque shook his head. It has nothing to do with that. I already know that Malfurion fell into a deep sleep because he was trapped by the nightmares of the King of Nightmares. He has been having nightmares for the past few years. I have already solved this riddle. All that's left is to wait for the actors to arrive. Tyron's eyes widened. Chapter 1772. The reason why the snitches could cause such devastating destruction was because they stirred up trouble from the inside. The strongest fortress was always breached from the inside. As the most unreasonable one-step transmigrator, he was best at beating up the snitches. From Kel'Thuzad, who was still a human during the Second Dark Portal War, to Benedictus, who had just been exposed, to Fandral Staghelm. 3 hours later, the great druids of the Cenarian Circle gathered below the World Tree Teldrassil. Fandral Staghelm was making a speech. The World Tree is the glory of Kadorai. It is the legacy that Kadorai lives on. Without the World Tree, Kadorai is not even worthy of being called Kadorai. Look, Teldrassil is drying up, and more cracks appear on the trunk. As the protectors and coordinators of nature, can we sit back and watch this happen? Fandral waved his hand and made a sweeping gesture. No, we can't sit back and watch this happen. With that, he raised a statue that had 4 legs and was in the shape of a centaur, but its body was decorated with many leaves. As the chairman of the Cenarian Circle, I formally propose a motion to use the statue of Remulos to heal the World Tree. Remulos was the son of the demigod Cenarius. After the death of Cenarius, he became the protector of the Moonlight Woodland. Despite the war, this sacred land still preserved its innocence. As the former home of the demigod Cenarius, the Moonlight Woodland bathed in eternal moonlight. After the destruction of the Well of Eternity in the Third Dark Portal War, the Night Elves were blessed by Elun and built a home for the druids here. The Moonlight Woodland once again became a safe harbor for the elves. Most of the Night Elves who did not move to Teldrassil stayed in the Moonlight Woodland, which was surrounded by ancient forest trees, and had almost no contact with other races in the outside world. After Malfurion fell into a deep sleep, Remulos provided a lot of help to the young druids. As the son of a demigod, a creature with a powerful divinity, and the symbol of the new generation of druids, Remulos had a very high reputation among the druids. For a moment, there was a lot of agreement around. The lower and middle druids thought it was a good idea, but the archdruids instinctively felt that something was wrong. Brawlbear Mantle was the first to speak. No one can deny that Teldrassil is a miracle of the world. It is a magnificent natural landscape created by us druids through the magic of Azeroth itself. But even such a huge tree had to go through life and death like any other living thing. However, Teldrassil is abnormally sick in his prime. It's not malnutrition or physical damage but sickness. This is very abnormal. I think we need to find the cause first, instead of using magic to cure it. Brawl's words were pertinent and reasonable, but his argument was immediately rejected by Fandral. Teldrassil is withering, it needs more nutrients. We use magic to hasten its growth, so we should give it more magic. As long as its body is strong enough, it can ignore all pests and diseases. Fandral's high-sounding argument was refuted by a sharp female voice. Just like how you poisoned Malfurion with morning wheat, while claiming that you were going to rescue him? To be as shameless as you are, you must be one of the best among traitors. The one who spoke was naturally Tyrant Whisperwind, the highest leader of the Night Elves, and the spokesperson of the moon goddess Elun. These words caused an uproar among the druids. What was going on? This was no longer a quarrel, but a fight to the death. A fight to the death. Ever since the Elun Sisterhood and the Druids seized power from Queen Azhara 10,000 years ago, the Night Elves had been in a parallel political system that had nothing to do with each other. The Moon Goddess belonged to the Moon Goddess, and the Druids belonged to the Druids. Although their doctrines were similar and their origins were the same, the bosses were actually different. The Elun Sisterhood was a typical divine path, and the will of Elun was absolute. The Druid doctrine was based on the harmony of nature, and even the founder of the religion, Cenarius, was only the highest teacher, not the ruler. The two factions respected and helped each other, and this was how they had been for the past 10,000 years. Now that Tyrant had suddenly launched an attack, if there was no concrete evidence, it might cause a civil war among the Night Elves. The Druids saw that Tyrant had not only brought Duke Marcus, the higher-ups of the Elun Sisterhood, Chandri's Feathermoon and other generals, she had also brought over 1,000 sentries from the Moon Goddess Temple. Just this was enough to cause them to be in an uproar. High Priest Whisperwind, please be careful with your words. May I ask, do you have concrete evidence? Navarax shouted on the spot. Of course I do. The evidence is this morning wheat. Tyrant tossed a large bag into the distance. This such bright natural energy, there's no problem. Navarax sensed it. Tyrant laughed coldly. Of course there's no problem, if you didn't use the Emerald Dream to send your soul into this bag of wheat. At this moment, Fandrel's expression finally changed. Nonsense. Is that so? Malfurion is in a deep sleep because he was ambushed by the King of Nightmares, Savis, in the Emerald Dream, and is trapped in a nightmare cage. Tyrant held the bow in her left hand, extremely agitated. She was already beyond angry. Her impassioned voice suddenly rose an octave. Fandrel, you ordered the Druids to collect large amounts of morning wheat in order to create a cursed poison to sprinkle on Malfurion's sleeping body. If not for the Moon Goddess Temple's priests taking care of him, I'm afraid that even if Malfurion escaped from the King of Nightmares, he would not have a body to return to. At this moment Duque spoke. Of course, Fandrel. You can say that there was a traitor among the Druids who collected the morning wheat, and he was bribed by the King of Nightmares to add poison. But who is in the right and who is in the wrong? Just find an Archdruid to sink into the Emerald Dream to find out. Not only do you check the morning wheat, but also carefully listen to Teldrassil's voice. Hearing Duque and Tyrant's words, the Druids began to waver. They were right. As long as an Archdruid sank his soul into the Emerald Dream, all the mysteries would be revealed. The three Archdruids, Brawl, Navarax and Rintotem, looked at each other and made a decision on the spot. Brawl said, I'm better at fighting. I'll protect you. Navarax smiled bitterly. I failed once in the Howling Caves. I'll forget about it this time. Then, I'll do it. The Minotaur Druid Hamuel smiled bitterly. Chapter 1773. The situation had taken a sharp turn for the worse for Fandrel. The Druids had not been so sensitive before the incident with Benedictus. If someone else had been in charge, the Druids' subconscious xenophobia would have kicked in. Duque was different. For more than 20 years, Duque had the nickname of Eye of Light among the higher-ups of the Alliance. It described Duque's ability to distinguish between good and bad, and to find the traitor directly. The most famous and earliest were the ones who discovered that Sargeras had possessed Medivh. Then, they found Nesario, who had used the ultimate transformation spell to become the Lord of Presto. Then, it was Onyxia, and most recently, it was the Archbishop of the Stormwind Kingdom, Benedictus. As long as they were a traitor, they would not be able to stay for long without being caught by Duke. Or rather, it was not that the time had not come. When Duque arrived, the Druids had actually believed most of it. Not only did they not continue to cluster around Fandrel's Staghelm, but they also spread out to form an encirclement to prevent Staghelm from making a move. What they lacked now was the most decisive evidence. At this point in time, Fandrel panicked. If it was someone else, they might have wet their pants. Whether or not he was the acting chairman of the Cenarian Circle, Duque was a true demigod and the Alliance's commander. He was Alexstrasza, whom the night elves worshipped like a true god, often bragged, and shamelessly asked Elin to borrow a high priest to warm his bed. No matter how Staghelm tried to stay calm, he was still panicking. It was completely different from the plan that he had agreed with Savis. This was no longer just making a mess. It was simply piercing the sky. Duke Marcus, you are the enemy of nature. The butcher who abused magic to destroy nature. What do you mean by slandering me like this? Even if the weed is poisonous, it's because I didn't notice. The same goes for Teldrassil. We can't find a way to cure the world tree, and we're just working together. What right do you have to slander me? And I have no reason to do so. Fandral insisted that Duque was slandering him, and argued loudly. Yes, he doesn't have a motive, right? The druids were confused. Duke's mouth spat out only one name. Vartan. In an instant all the elves understood. Fandral Staghelm was not only a well-known archdruid, but also a famous sun lover. Fandral's wife died in childbirth, so he loved his son Velastin dearly. When his son was almost 1,000 years old, he still broke the door guard for his son, telling him to go home at 9 o'clock every night. It was like holding it in his hands and not letting it go, holding it in his palms, yet afraid of melting. It wasn't easy for Valston to live up to his expectations. He had displayed his independent temperament in various occasions, and had even given birth to a granddaughter for him. It was only then that he could relax a little. Unfortunately, during the War of the Shifting Sands in Silithus 1,000 years ago, Staghelm's father and son fought side by side in an attempt to restrain the insectoid army that invaded Silithus. The mutant insects continued to pour out of the Ahn'Qiraj fortress to support the insect army at the front. All of Silithus was surrounded. Fandral made a decision that he would regret for the rest of his life. He sent the young Valston to guard the Night Elf outpost in Southwind Village. Unfortunately, Valston died when Southwind Village was attacked by the Ahn'Qiraj army. Fandral Staghelm was filled with regret. Even many years after his son's death, the druids could still hear Fandral crying at night for his son. Grief and pain had changed Fandral's character, perhaps even more than that. Since Valston's death, he made many tough decisions, and his actions became more and more hasty and arbitrary. Since a few hundred years ago, he did not allow anyone to question his decisions. Many night elves saw this as a sign of his confidence, but some thought that he was too arrogant. Fandral himself did not care about what others thought, unless that person was in his way. Everyone knew that in the past 1,000 years, he had been looking for ways to resurrect his son in various ways. In fact, because Duque accepted the Qiraj insectoids as his slaves, Fandral was even more furious. He even encouraged the entire Cenarian circle to pressure Duque to execute all the insectoids. However, none of the archdruids were willing to support him, and Tyron had suppressed this matter. Now, everything Duke and Fandral had done was for the sake of their dead son Valston. The druids were shocked, but in their hearts they immediately accepted this explanation. Duke Marcus, are you humiliating my son who sacrificed himself for my people and for the peace of Kalimdor? I can't accept this. Fandral took half a step back, still trying to defend himself. It was very simple, because there was no evidence left behind for what he did. He did not believe that Duque, who had nothing to do with him, could see what happened in his dream. Duque was indeed powerful. Obviously, the dream was not Duque's domain. Duque laughed coldly. Many of you only know that under Nozdorma's request, I returned to the ancient war 10,000 years ago for the balance of history. Probably not many people know that not only did I convert Archimonde's shadow curse, I also obtained Shadow Force, which I used to enter the Burning Legion. I even commanded Savis as a Void Lord, didn't I? The King of Nightmares, Savis? This almost taboo name suddenly made all the druids nerves sensitive. In the eyes of outsiders, the Cenarian Circle's druids in the past 10,000 years seemed to be fighting with the air. Only the druids who had truly entered the Emerald Dream knew how terrifying and dangerous the nightmares in the dream world were. The only name that could not be avoided was Savis. Duque continued. I have mastered the ability to control souls, and I have also memorized Savi's soul undulations. I didn't feel it before, but now that I see you, I can immediately sense that you are covered in that guy's disgusting stench. This time, Fandrel's expression finally changed. That's right. Although he had served Savi's in the past, he had never completely accepted Savi's power of nightmares like this. A long, long time ago, when Fandrel was searching for a way to resurrect his son, he was entangled by a nightmare. However, the nightmare did not torture him. Instead, it told him that there was a way to resurrect Volston. Fandrel, who was crazy about his son, of course immediately accepted the King of Nightmares' help and request. He lured Malfurion into the dream to investigate, and was trapped in the dream. Then, he persuaded the council to plant a second world tree, and secretly planted part of the King of Nightmares' essence on Teldrassil, cursing the tree from the beginning. Chapter 1774. From then on, the King of Nightmares controlled part of the World Tree's power, and could use Teldrassil's connection to the world to carry out a series of spreading operations. The King of Nightmares, of course, gave Fandrel a new son after Fandrel made these contributions. One of the King of Nightmares transformed into Volston, and at the same time read Fandrel's dream, making this son look exactly like Fandrel. Fandrel had always hidden this son well, and let the fake Volston act as a bridge between him and the King of Nightmares. This time, the King of Nightmares was ready to invade Azeroth. The fake Volston sent an order. Fandrel was to gather all the druids around the World Tree to prevent them from discovering the Nightmares' next attack plan. Then, Fandrel was to lead these druids to use a method that looked like treatment, but was actually poisoning the World Tree to deepen the disease. If this was in the original history, a terrible event would have erupted and spread throughout the entire Azeroth continent. Everywhere in the world, regardless of race, everyone began to fall into endless nightmares. Whether it was Kalimdor or the people of the Eastern Kingdom, they all began to fall into a deep sleep and had nightmares. Only a few people with strong willpower were able to avoid falling into a deep sleep. This directly bought more time for the Wing of Death's conspiracy. Coincidentally, at this time, the Tauren druid Hamuels will sank into the Emerald Dream and heard Teldrassil's call for help. Moreover, Fandrel had the insight that Hammer had discovered his secret and ambushed this noble druid. Originally, it should have been an evenly matched battle between the druids, but Fandrel had obtained the power given to him by the King of Nightmares. In addition, he had extracted the power of the fallen World Tree, so he defeated Hamuel and imprisoned him, preparing to corrupt him to become the minion of another King of Nightmares. However, in this life, Fandrel did not have the chance to further poison Teldrassil. Just as Fandrel was about to completely fall, Duque directly rushed out to confront Fandrel. In fact, when Duque said that he had recently discovered the smell of Savi's on Fandrel, Tyrant also questioned Duque why he did not tell her immediately. Duque replied, "The soul and will of intelligent creatures are the most complicated things in the world. There is seldom absolute light, or the most complete darkness. The souls of most intelligent creatures were in a state of confusion that was a mixture of righteousness and evil. We can't destroy them just because they have some evil thoughts." This logic was just like when Duque was in school. A bunch of animals clamored to push Sister Bing Bing down. Then, he heard a group of dinosaurs shouting that they wanted to push down their Adonis. Thinking is one thing, doing is another. Fandrel's actions over the years were extreme, but his soul had not really fallen. His obsession with smashing was something that no one could resolve. Tyron fell silent at Duque's explanation, and instead gave an example. "Just like how I'm loyal to the public and willing to sacrifice everything for Caldorii, but you've shamelessly unlocked all my postures in secret." Duque clenched his teeth and didn't dare to continue. Returning to this moment, since Duque dared to throw out the name of the King of Nightmares, Savi's, he naturally had an even greater trump card. "Fandrel, I'm so disappointed in you." A voice familiar to the druids sounded, and Malfurion Stormrage, the true leader of the Cenarian Circle, who seemed to be covered in grass and had antlers on his head, appeared behind Tyrant and the rest. The team naturally made way for the spiritual leader of the Night Elves to enter. Malfurion leaned on his staff and rushed over with large strides. Hamuel, there's no need to go to the Emerald Dream. I've already contacted Teldrassil, and it told me all the reasons. As for you, Fandral, Malfurion turned to look at Fandral Staghelm. There was anger in his eyes, but even more sorrow and pain. Obviously, he had never thought that Fandral, whom he had personally nurtured, would fall to such a state. Fandral finally lost his composure. He turned pale with fright and blurted out, "No, impossible. How could you break free from the King of Nightmares' cage?" Duque sneered. Huh? You knew that Malfurion was trapped in the King of Nightmares' cage, and yet you still let Morning Weed up? Are you not going to continue pretending? Pretending? Continue pretending? Duque originally wanted to retort, but Tyron quietly tugged at his sleeve and shook her head almost imperceptibly. It's enough that you were able to rescue Malfurion in time. Duque immediately relented. Actually, rescuing Malfurion was a small accident. When Duque rushed over and informed Tyrande of Malfurion's problem, he went to see Malfurion. As someone who had once been part of the Burning Legion, Duque was very sensitive to soul fluctuations. Under the system notification, he received a message from a nightmare. Although Malfurion was imprisoned by the King of Nightmares, he also used the power of nightmares as a hint to inform Duque of the most important person's name. That person was the wielder of the orc hero Brock's magic battle axe, Sora Salufar. This female orc was Brock Salufar's niece. Years ago, when Cenarius was killed by Lord Howl, the divine weapon that he had personally forged using oak trees and was blessed by the moon god eventually fell into the hands of this female orc as a spoil of war. And this weapon was the key to destroying the King of Nightmares' cage. The rest was only natural. Duque asked Tyrande to bypass Brainless Howl and contact Wajin in private. Wajin, who was struggling to maintain a friendly relationship with the Alliance, immediately agreed to let Sora, who was not valued by Brainless Howl, make the trip. At this moment, Malfurion happened to arrive at the perfect moment. Fandral, are you still going to be stubborn? Give up on your damned plan. What bullsh** T King of Nightmares, Savi's is a liar. There's no way he can resurrect your son. Malfurion shouted with every drop of air in his lungs. Fandral Staghelm's face showed a sorrowful expression, but it was unknown why he was sorrowful. It's too late, Malfurion, and I'm willing to pay any price for my Volston. With a wave of his hand, the famous druid's hands suddenly glowed with an illusory black light. In the blink of an eye, thousands of translucent nightmare minions with twisted limbs and tentacles jumped out of thin air and began to attack all living beings present. Malfurion turned his head to look at Tyrande, who was standing beside Duque, and then turned his gaze to Duque. Next, it's a matter between master and disciple. Duque, do you agree? I agree. Chapter 1775. The reason why the alliance was an alliance was because all the allied countries and races were equal. This was written in a charter that hung high above the headquarters of the alliance in Stormwind City. One could see it as soon as they entered. To this day, the throne hall was not a fixed place. Almost every kingdom in the alliance had a hall with many thrones. Wherever the leaders of the alliance gathered, it was called the throne hall. It was at that moment, but not after it was gone. Every hall would definitely have this charter hanging on the wall. This represented equality and the respect between countries. If it was the Empire, Duque could just bring people to capture Fandral and beat him up. There would be no need for so much trouble. It was because he respected the traditions of the Night Elves, as well as the entanglement of politics and religion, that Duque patiently confronted Fandral. On the other hand, he was giving Tyrande face. Duque was definitely happy to see Tyrande monopolizing power. After all, that would save him a lot of trouble. However, he did not want Tyrande to take all the power in the form of a tyrant. In fact, Malfurion was also involved in Fandral's incident. In this life, Tyrande did not choose Malfurion. In a sense, Malfurion's green card was real. Even if Duque succeeded, he still respected Tyrande. He had spent too little time with Tyrande. He could not compare to the Stormwind brothers. The two brothers were Tyrant's childhood sweethearts for more than 13,000 years. They would always have a special place in her heart. It was not appropriate to belittle or elevate them. Therefore, this time, Duque played the role of a quiet, handsome man, and quietly watched the battle between master and disciple. There was no Liang Jingru in this world, and there was probably no big sister who gave him courage. Duque did not know where Fandral got his courage from, but he actually wanted to kill Malfurion in front of Duque and Tyrant. Corruption, grant me strength. Fandral's current posture was very similar to Archimonde's when he absorbed the vengeful souls of the world and prepared to use his ultimate move on Mount Hyjal. Unfortunately, the Ack brothers' graves were already 3 feet tall. Old man, don't learn from him, okay? Clearly, Fandral was absorbing the fallen power of the World Tree for his own use. The main point was that Duque had exposed Fandral's scheme in advance in this life, and the decay of the World Tree was much shallower than in the original history. That kind of superficial level of depravity power was not even worth mentioning. Duque saw that Fandral had not reached the demigod level after absorbing for a long time, and he began to yawn. Naturally, Malfurion and the others wouldn't keep Duque waiting. After all, this was a disgrace to the Cenarian Circle. If they couldn't handle it themselves and had to ask Duque to do it, not only would they lose face, they would also fall into a passive position politically. Obviously, Fandral would not give up without putting up a fight. He had summoned a nightmare monster the size of a villa. At least in terms of momentum, it was very scary. Such a huge, semi-illusory, black, and even living tissue could not be counted. Anyway, a druid could not avoid a single one of its tentacles. The slightest touch would cause the druid to fall into a nightmare, as if he was having an epileptic seizure, and kept struggling on the ground. Have a taste of nature's wrath. Brawl and Hamuir exerted themselves to the limit, working together to create a green hat, and put it on the nightmare monster's head. No one knew how it worked, but their attacks blocked the attacks of the nightmare monster's claws. Malfurion summoned the World Tree, and there was still a lot of nature energy left to block Fandral's spells. At the same time, a green glow appeared on top of Malfurion's head, and instantly gathered on the tips of his 2 antlers. Then, he shot out a ray similar to moving deadlight. Swoosh! It seemed to have missed, but after the ray passed Fandral's body, it suddenly made a turn and shot into the void. The seemingly empty void suddenly cracked open, and an object with the appearance of a young night elf fell out of the void. Vastine! Fandral let out a scream. That's right. Malfurion's attack from the beginning was to cover up his real move, which was to directly attack the fake Vastine hiding behind Fandral. The druid's magic attack was not strong, but the magic of a great druid was still strong. Malfurion shattered the shadow creature that had taken the form of Valston. In the next second, this farcical betrayal ended, because Fandral was a sun control freak. When he saw his son being beaten up, Fandral, who could not bear the thought of losing his beloved son for the second time, Fandral fainted on the spot, because of the great psychological impact. Without the main brain, the nightmare monster's claws that attacked based on instinct were naturally no match for the druids. Duque, what about Isra? At this time, Malfurion finally thought of the possibility that the King of Nightmares' target was Isra. I'm fine. Since Duque reminded me, how could I be so stupid to fall into that trap? In the void, a green-haired woman with the appearance of an elf walked out. Although she was only a projection, the dragon horns on her head, and the pair of eyes that almost never opened told everyone who she was. The Emerald Dragon King, Isra. When the druids all bowed to Isra, Isra nodded at Duque in gratitude. Thank you, Duque. That was indeed a very sinister trap. If not for your reminder, even I might have been trapped there. You're welcome, Duque said calmly, showing off the demeanor of a master. Tyrant looked at Fandral, who had fainted on the ground. Malfurion, what about him? Malfurion looked up at the sky and sighed. Fandral, he was also tricked by the King of Nightmare. Strictly speaking, he is also a victim. Seeing that he did not cause too much damage, I have decided to imprison him in a prison in the Moonlight Woodland that is used to purify the soul until he regains consciousness. Although everyone present, including Malfurion himself, doubted whether Fandral could really recover, what he said was the truth. After all, after Malfurion's inspection, he found that the world tree was not seriously poisoned. The only one who was truly tricked by Fandral was Malfurion. Even the victim had given up on pursuing justice. What else could the others say? At the end of the day, this was the internal affairs of the Cenarian Circle. However, Duque made a request. I agree with the Cenarian Circle's method of handling things. However, I am worried about Staghelm's mental state. I heard that he has a granddaughter. Tyrande immediately understood what he meant. His daughter-in-law, Rhaera, and granddaughter, Astalia, live in the Night Elf territory of Grey Valley Astrana. However, I will bring them to the Moon Goddess's temple. This alright. Malfurion leaned on his staff and sighed. Chapter 1776. This was the check and balance, the so-called insurance. It was obvious that the Cenarian Circle made a big mess of this matter. The Moon Temple didn't take the opportunity to suppress the Cenarian Circle, and didn't even take action against Duque, which was already giving the Cenarian Circle a lot of face. It would be insensible to refuse again. Only Duque knew that when Fandral was imprisoned in history, the Orc army attacked Grey Valley and burned Astrana to the ground. His granddaughter was also killed. Fandral, who had just woken up, was once again dealt a heavy blow. The grief of losing his beloved son and granddaughter directly caused Fandral to go crazy. All his madness was completely transformed into the flames of revenge. Under the lead of a traitor, he turned to the Fire Demon King. With the power of Ragnaros, he first reborn his daughter-in-law as the first fire druid in history, and he himself became the leader of the fire druids, replacing the position of Majordomo, who died in history. Fandral would rather bury Azeroth with his own hands than live in this world that lost his beloved son. By doing this, Duque didn't know if he could pull this troublemaker back to the normal world one last time. Although he wasn't obligated to do this, at least he did his best. What happened next was nothing to write home about. Malfurion used magic to find the location of the King of Nightmares parasitizing the World Tree, and worked together with all the other druids to completely eradicate it, freeing the World Tree from the corruption of nightmares. Isra, who had been notified early in the morning, led the Green Dragon Legion, dodged Savi's trap, and defeated the nightmares that came out of nowhere. The 4 green dragons that had been saved by a single sentence from Duke Back then were even more eye-catching in this battle, as the 4 dragons took the lead in this battle. Thank you, Duque. Thank you for saving the 5-color guardian dragons again and again. Isra's girly voice sounded so cute no matter when he heard it. Sometimes, Duque also thought that if the dragon aspects lost their jobs and transmigrated to Earth, Isra could at least change her profession and become a voice actress. Besides, unlike the annoying dragon aspect Collegos, Isra in her elf form was quite popular. The most popular female characters in World of Warcraft could be determined by how many 18x books they had. Well, Isra had quite a lot of books. Thinking about the time in the near future when Isra would fall, Duque felt a wave of displeasure in his heart. He secretly made a decision. Another rebellion was extinguished without much suspense. Duque let out a long sigh of relief. In the guest house as expected, Duque waited for Tyrande, who was dressed in the white robes of a priestess. The Jeppo robe was cut into the quicksand robe of a priest, and it was even a vacuum version. Tyrande knew that Duque loved this. The beautiful expression that only Duque possessed, and that tens of thousands of Night Elf believers had never imagined appeared on that dignified face that was filled with a holy aura. Just like that, Tyrande knelt down gracefully and began to swallow the divine sword with her mouth. Woo-woo! What powerful skills! The sky was just beginning to brighten. Tyrande did not even want to move a finger. Duque, I want to apologize to you. Tyrande's voice was very soft. Why do you apologize? Brother Stormrage, they are very special existences to me. I did not accept their feelings, but in the eyes of others, even Illidan, I still unconsciously show affection, Tyrande said faintly. Duque smiled. Tyrant actually cared too much about Malfurion. She did not want to lose this pair of childhood friends, but she was also afraid that Duque would be unhappy. Even when Malfurion showed signs of a nightmare, she did not think of asking Duque for help. Duque gently caressed Tyrant's hair. "Silly girl, you have stayed chaste for me for tens of thousands of years. Why wouldn't I trust you?" Tyrant smiled as well, hugging her man tightly. She wanted nothing more than to fuse her body with Duke's. "Hey Duque, do you have any ideas about becoming a true god?" Tyrant was actually asking when she would publicly serve Duque. This was the agreement between Duque and Elun. When Duque became a true god, Elun would officially give Tyrant to Duque. Duque's expression darkened. He could only tell the truth. "I don't have any ideas yet. I can only confirm that the path of the elements alone is not going to work. If it was in the Dungeons and Dragons world, those who could completely master any of the elements would be true gods made of iron. Moreover, they would be the most powerful gods with great divine power among the true gods. The rules of planet Azeroth were obviously different. Lords who could control the four major elements were at most demigods. On the other hand, Sea Thun and the other oddly shaped aliens were true gods. If not for the fact that the statues of the moon goddess were all humanoid, Duque would have thought that this was a world where the aliens were the bosses. Duque had personally snatched the fire demon king Ragnaros's share of the fire element. He had used the system elf to make countless models, but he still could not find a way to become a true god. Duque could confirm that he definitely lacked one or more key elements or abilities. As for what it would depend on luck. If possible, Duque obviously wanted to become a true god before Return of the Army. This would give Duque more confidence in fighting Sargeras. Indeed, Duque had used Mediva's power to send Sargeras' soul into a bottomless abyss. It wasn't that Sargeras couldn't come out, but that he didn't have the confidence. In order to sneak in, he had used hundreds of years to trick Mediva's mother. In order to achieve the ultimate goal of invading Azeroth, he didn't mind waiting a little longer. Moreover, it had only been a mere 20 years since the opening of the Dark Portal. For a fallen titan with an infinite lifespan, he could totally afford to wait. The entire history of Azeroth was a process of waxing and waning. In the history of the Azeroth Alliance and the Horde, there were indeed many powerhouses and many inspiring stories in the later stages. However, without exception, it made Duque feel that there was a lack of a sense of history. This was not an illusion. When the Alliance came to William's son, Anduin Wrynn, to carry the flag, countless players were complaining that each generation was worse than the previous. However, this life of Duque should be much better. Hugging Tyrant, Duque looked at the wife hunter achievement that the bastard system elf had given him. He almost wanted to kill the system elf on the spot. Duque held back. Buddha said, "Don't say it. Such an achievement, it was good that he knew." Ahem. Tyrant, you have to rebuild the defense line at Mount Hyjal as soon as possible. I can sense that Land of Fire will be near Mount Hyjal. Chapter 1777. Okay, Tyrant agreed. The two of them had wanted to spend some time together, but they were soon woken up by the noise of the crowd. Victory! The great traitor Savis has finally been executed. Ha ha ha. Yes, there was actually a small incident last night. The King of Nightmares, Savis, had been killed. In the original history, after knowing that the mastermind was Savis, and that Isra had been captured by Savis to save him, Malfurion came up with a new plan to deal with Savis. He wanted to kill the King of Nightmares and save the people trapped in nightmares. He found Brawl and Hamuer, and gathered those who were not affected by the nightmares to attract the attention of the King of Nightmares. It was a classic diversion. The fake attack force was formed by Varian from the Alliance and Bane, the son of the Tauren chief Cain. Not only that, but the red, blue, and green dragons had also joined the battle. Even the neutral goblins, kobolds, bear monsters, and even some forest beasts had joined the resistance army. After entering the Emerald Dream, Malfurion found the place where Isra was imprisoned. For this, he sacrificed the powerful green dragon Irenicus to destroy the cage that imprisoned Isra and save him. Next was to defeat Savi's again. This required attacking both his body and soul at the same time, or else Savi's would continue to be reborn. Savi's was very strong, and even with Isra's help, he was still no match for Savi's strength. In the end, Malfurion borrowed the power of the entire Azeroth, and in an instant, the entire Azeroth began to reign, the druid's tranquility skill. The heavy rain began to wash away the green fog, and some of the corrupted people began to awaken. Finally, they killed Savi's en masse. In the original history, Malfurion, the super druid, was at his peak. Unfortunately, in this life there was Duque. Although Duke kept singing, "I'll just quietly watch you act cool," to his daughter all day long, in reality, he couldn't stand people acting cool the most. It was fine to watch others seek death, but not acting cool. Especially those who were his women in this life, the original wives in the original version of history. Since Duque had saved Isra, he had also dug a hole for Savi's. With Duque's warning, not only did Isra not get captured, but he also set up an illusion in the dream and forced Savi's to reveal his true body. Originally, Savi's had hoped that Fandral would be able to steal control of Teldrassil, and then use the power of the Fallen World Tree to wreak havoc. A fellow who only liked to play tricks would definitely have limited strength in a direct confrontation. When the conspiracy was exposed, Savi's failure was doomed. He didn't possess as much power as he did in the original history. Sarvis could be considered to be extremely strong. When Savi's and his main nightmare minions were forced out of the Emerald Dream, Malfurion directly used Tranquility to attack Savi's body and the minions of the King of Nightmares. With Malfurion in the real world and Isra in the Emerald Dream tying down Savi's power, this was the best opportunity for the orc Sora to enter the Emerald Dream. Sora raised the divine weapon that Brock had used to injure Sargeras and swung it at Harvey's Tree of Souls. At the same time, the multiple attacks of the real world and the dream world completely destroyed Savi's. Before Savi's was completely destroyed, he kept asking for help from his master, N'Zoth, who was supporting him, but the ruthless N'Zoth didn't respond to him. Thus, what should have been a very grand conspiracy and dangerous situation disappeared without a trace before it was fully launched. Duque still didn't make a move. Firstly, dream power wasn't his forte. Secondly, it was a bit embarrassing for a demigod like him to personally deal with Savi's. Who was Savi's? In the ancient war back then, he was tricked by Duque into becoming a follower. He was fooled until he didn't know where he was tricked. This guy would cause trouble 10,000 years later, and he didn't even dare to directly attack Duque. If he didn't even have this kind of courage, Duque would only lower his status if he personally dealt with him. Duque stayed with the Night Elves for 3 days in a row. Every day he was half openly with Tyrant. Tyrant's adopted daughter Chandris was about to go berserk before Duque left. The Dark Iron Dwarves couldn't stay any longer. It was a little funny. The dwarf princess Moira, who stole the highest authority of the dwarves in his previous life, had a rather bitter life. Although the only enemy left of her and her father was the Dark Iron Child, and she successfully angered Magni's beard to the point that it rose in the air. The Dark Iron Dwarves that she led went from bad to worse. When the cataclysm happened, the Dark Iron Dwarves finally couldn't go on any longer. It was very simple. It was because Duque had destroyed the molten core. Using Duke Hydraxia's hand, Duque flooded the entire molten core, allowing the burning steps to recover its vitality. This made life difficult for the Dark Iron Dwarves who used the molten core's endless flames to forge their weapons and live. The majestic Blackrock Mountain had now become a fountain due to the geological changes of the cataclysm. The movement of the Earth's crust had compressed the water that had accumulated in the molten core, causing it to spurt out of the ground without a reason. No matter how many tunnels the Dark Iron Dwarves dug in the Blackrock Mountain, how could they avoid being flooded? In this era, how could there be so many sophisticated waterproofing layers, protective doors, and so on? A few days after the cataclysm, the dwarven sentries of Iron Stove Castle, at the front line of the Scorching Canyon, reported the discovery of a large number of Dark Iron Dwarves. Originally, for the sake of Moira, Muradin, who had become the regent, wanted to pretend that he didn't see them, who knew that more and more dark iron dwarves would gather, and eventually more than 200,000 people would emerge, marching towards the barren land in the northeast. This time Muradin Bronzebeard couldn't sit still. To the north of the barren land was Loch Moden, which was the most severely affected by the cataclysm. As the largest source of food for the Bronzebeard dwarves, the status of Loch Moden after the cataclysm was extremely important. The dark iron dwarves had come out, obviously looking for food. The barren land, as the name implied, that place where even birds wouldn't defecate, could not support more than 200,000 dark iron dwarves. Where else could they go? Wasn't it to Loch Moden? The Bronzebeard dwarves and the Wildhammer dwarves had long been reconciled, but not the dark iron dwarves. If more than 200,000, and probably more than this number of dark iron dwarves rushed into Loch Moden, the Bronzebeard dwarves would be in trouble. Who knew what the hundreds of thousands of old enemies would do? Muradin directly called for help from the Alliance, and launched a classic ambush siege. In fact, it was not appropriate to call it a war, because when the dark iron dwarves were suddenly surrounded by more than 100,000 mechanized troops, they looked at the black barrels of diesel tanks, and then at the huge flying warships hovering in the sky. They were stunned on the spot. I, Moira, in the name of the Queen of the Dark Iron Dwarves, request a meeting of the Three Hammers, the short and fat traitor of the Bronzebeard family said. Chapter 1778. If she wasn't Moira Bronzebeard, Muradin's hand would have trembled a long time ago, and the dark iron dwarves would have become history. This was not an exaggeration. Duque waved his pen, and a strengthened version of Fatty, Little Fatty, was sent to the barren lands by Muradin. As a threatening attack, Little Fatty's mushroom cloud and earth-shattering tremors scared the dark iron dwarves half to death. Of course, it only blew up some wild dogs and vultures in the barren lands, but the dark iron dwarves, who hadn't seen the world for hundreds of years, and were still stuck in the era of cold weapons and gunpowder, had never seen such a ferocious thing. They peed their pants on the spot, knowing that this was a show of strength from the Alliance. Even if Moira was slapped on the left side of her face, she could only offer the right side of her face for the Alliance to slap. A group of dark iron dwarves were immediately disarmed and treated as prisoners. They were escorted by 30,000 mixed Alliance troops to the snowy Dan Molar. Near the Helm Lake in the east, the Alliance used a series of standard molded houses to build a refugee camp that could accommodate 300,000 dark iron dwarves in less than 3 days. Of course, other than the pitch-black cannons and the new spears on the walls of the refugee camp, the Bronzebeard dwarves were still very warm to the dark iron dwarves. At least there was no shortage of food, clothing, and medicine. There were also people stationed 24 hours a day to solve the various problems of the dark iron dwarves, and they swore in the name of the Bronzebeard dwarves that they would not kill them. Moira was brought to the Iron Furnace Castle, and under the guidance of a group of Bronzebeard dwarven elders, she met her father, who had become a diamond person. For a moment her mind became active. If her father had suddenly become a diamond person and died, without any last words, then she could naturally take over the power of the Bronzebeard dwarfs. Because Duque had a trick up his sleeve, she would be in trouble. In this life, there would definitely not be any conflicts where Anduin Wrynn was imprisoned by Moira, and William came to save his son in a rage. Anyway, the general framework was set in stone by Duque, and Moira could not play any tricks no matter how she jumped around. Duque even considerately did not appear in the Iron Furnace Castle, as if the dwarves' affairs were decided by the dwarves. As expected, the dwarves still formed the Council of Three Hammers, just like in history. Unlike the original version, it turned out that Moira had used dishonorable means to steal power. In this life, it was Muradin who fully deserved to become the chairman of the Three Hammer Council. The strongest Bronzebeard dwarves had 2 votes, while the Wildhammer dwarves and the Dark Iron dwarves had 1 vote each. This meant that anything the Bronzebeard dwarves wanted to do, they could do it. On the other hand, if Ebon and Wildhammer wanted to object, they would only be able to get 2 votes from each other, who they disliked, to put the motion on hold indefinitely. What Duque really cared about was Gilnis' return. As one of the 7 human kingdoms, Gilnis could be said to be the last piece of the puzzle for the human faction in the alliance. If history had been as it had been, and Rotterdam, Alterac, and Stormguard had all been destroyed, Duque wouldn't have cared if Gilnis had returned or not. But in this life, not only did Duque protect all the kingdoms, he even restored the once destroyed Stromgard. Gilnis was the only one left outside. It was like playing mahjong with 3 players missing. It was as awkward as it could get. However, as history progressed, everything was solved. During the Second Battle of the Dark Portal, King Xeon Greymane initially rejected Anduin Lothar and King Tirina's request to invite Gilnis to join the alliance. But in the end, under the suggestion of Vincent Godfrey, he agreed to join the alliance and sent a small group of soldiers to support the alliance. When the Second War finally ended, and the alliance demanded high taxes from Gilnis to build the Orc Shelter and Overwatch Fortress, and Gilnis couldn't get anything out of Alterac's territory, Xeon Greymane decisively left the alliance. Not only that, in order to prevent the alliance from interfering, Gilnis finally decided to build a high wall to separate himself from the other kingdoms. He even went as far as to cut off the southern Silverpine Forest that originally belonged to Gilnis, the territory of the Crowley family, Burningwood Village, and Ambermere. It was worth mentioning that although Gilnis announced that he was cutting off contact with the outside world, King Tirina's invited King Xeon Greymane to attend the baptism ceremony of Prince Arthas of Lordaeron at the Cathedral of Light in Stormwind City. In the 15th year of the Dark Portal, when the Third Dark Portal War broke out, following Arthas' fall and betrayal, the Scourge invaded Lordaeron. The latter sent messengers to Gilnis for help, but they were rejected by King Xeon Greymane. However, the Scourge didn't let this isolated country go. One of the armies attacked the Greymane Wall when Arthas led the main force of the Scourge south. In the face of such a huge disparity in military strength, King Xeon was forced to use Archmage Erigol's method to resist the invasion of the Scourge, summoning werewolves. Although the werewolves of Erigol eventually repelled the invasion of the Scourge army, it also began to spread among the survivors of Lordaeron and Gilnis in the Silverpine Forest, sowing the seeds of the curse of the Gilnis werewolves in the future. When Prince Arthas's army completely destroyed Lordaeron, and the Dalajan, Jaina, with the support of Duque, launched the largest westward expedition in human history. King Xeon was not enthusiastic about this, but another lord who had a good impression of the alliance and advocated for open borders, Darius Crowley, publicly declared his opposition to the king's policy. He sent his own army under the name of the Gilnis Brigade to join Jaina's fleet in the alliance's fleet. This was the foreshadowing of the split between them in the future. In the following years, although the Greymane Wall isolated the threat of the Scourge and werewolves to Gilnis, the curse of the werewolves still inevitably began to spread in this isolated land. In the beginning, the spread of the curse was limited and small. The king and other nobles would bring hunting rifles into the Black Forest on the night of the full moon to secretly hunt the werewolves that occupied the area. However, this limited containment was forced to stop after an accident. King Xeon Greymane was bitten by a werewolf and contracted the curse. Fortunately, his royal doctor Kellinan managed to temporarily suppress the bestial nature of the curse and the changes in his body. Not only that, but a mysterious night elf priestess appeared in his field of vision. Her name was Belisa, a werewolf that was later called the Old Wolf King by the players. Xeon Greymane was finally born. Chapter 1779. Belisa successfully helped King Greymane suppress his werewolf nature for a long time, and told him about the origin of the werewolf curse. A group of night elf druids abused the wild power given by nature, resulting in disastrous consequences and hopeless depravity. With the death of Erigol, his summoned werewolves regained their freedom. Once a fallen, one of the stubborn claw druids, Layla claimed to be the leader, and formed a wolf-worshipping cult among the werewolves known as the Bloodfang werewolves. Many people of Gilnis betrayed their country, and joined this secret organization for various reasons. They moved secretly under the high walls of the Gilnis kingdom, spreading the curse to more and more people in an unstoppable manner. When the werewolf curse spread, and the people could neither find safety nor escape from the high walls, Lord Darius Crowley launched a mutiny and attacked Grayman's palace in Gilnis. He declared that he wanted to overthrow the tyranny of the Jinn and end the isolation of the kingdom to save Gilnis. The civil war was very bloody and intense. Although Crowley's army was defeated by the king and imprisoned, the kingdom also suffered heavy losses and fell into chaos. The remnants of the rebel army were still active throughout the kingdom from time to time. They even hid countless firearms in the capital in an attempt to start a second civil war. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lael, who was growing stronger and stronger, launched a fatal attack on the fragile capital. The Gilnis kingdom's guards and royal guards were quickly defeated by the Bloodfang werewolves. Countless people were killed or cursed in this battle. In desperation, King Darius and his soldiers were freed and pardoned by King Xian. With the help of his daughter, Rona, the rebel army at the North Gate regained the weapons used in the Civil War and covered the retreat of the refugees in the Cathedral of Light of Dawn. Unlike in history, there weren't any Forsaken attacking Gilnis in this life. So, after gathering the entire nation's forces and allowing the rescued werewolves living in Terrandor to join Gilnis, the Bloodfang werewolves' attack was defeated. In the next few years, Gilnis experienced several serious rebellions and coups, which almost exhausted the kingdom's vitality. When the cataclysm came, Gilnis's economy finally collapsed. Gilnis was the smallest nation among the 7 nations, only slightly larger than Alterac. Back then, in order to prevent the alliance from rudely interfering with internal affairs, they even gave up on the most fertile silverpine forest territory and built the Greymane Wall at the southern end of the mountain. The rest of the terrain was mainly mountainous, and it was destined that there was not much food production. Even with such a small amount of arable land, it still required a lot of manpower to cultivate and plant. With the werewolves wreaking havoc, not only did food production decline, but even hunting in the forest became incomparably difficult. It was already a blessing that the cataclysm did not cause Gilnis any anger. Unfortunately, the earthquake easily collapsed a large number of houses and a large section of the city wall of Gilnis City. This was simply adding insult to injury. According to history, King Xian had been introduced to the alliance by the Archdruid Malfurion, and thus met William. But in this life, Duque felt a little surprised. What? Jean Greymane wants to see me? In the middle of the night? Duque, who happened to be in the South Sea city with Elugia for a state visit in the middle of the night, received this news. Duque was a little unhappy. Duque, Xian is a king after all. It must be urgent for him to want to see you in the middle of the night. Elugia tried to persuade him. All right. Duque used the 999 consecutive strikes of Duque's godly sword in one go, and sent the Queen of Alterac to the sky. After tidying up a little, he saw the tired old alpha wolf in the study. Xian was obviously very surprised. He did not think that Duque would actually be willing to meet him in the middle of the night. His mouth moved for a long time, but he could not say a word. Duque carefully looked at the old alpha wolf, and suddenly found that he did not know what to say. Indeed, Xian was old, and his hair had become extremely white. Duque felt that he was even more pleasing to the eye. Back then, Xian was a typical political villain. Not only was he fat, but he was also all kinds of sarcastic and picky. When there was trouble, he would shrink back, and when there was benefit, he would roll over like a hungry dog that saw a bone. Although he was old now, he looked more capable. His white hair was parted at 6 to 4. Hanging to the side of his chin. His arms, which used to be full of fat, were now only left with explosive power and beautiful muscles. His tight black silk clothes showed off his muscles, and the golden leather armor that exposed his shoulders and leggings completely rid him of the image of a scholar. Xian, who was once recognized by the first generation of the Alliance as one of the 5 weaklings who was only fit to play sand-piling with Turinas during the war, should be quite powerful now. Duque teased. Xian, why do I feel that you are even more handsome now than you were back then? That one sentence made Xion's nervous mood fly away. Ah, at least Duque is not too distant to me. He let out a long sigh. I can't compare to you. Eternal life and youth. Duque walked to the wine cabinet. Do you want something to drink? Alicia is very rich. You won't be able to make her poor. This was actually the queen's study, specially prepared by Alicia for Duque's use. Duque treated this place like his own home. Xion was a little embarrassed, but he quickly adjusted his emotions. Do you have Alterac's gold wine? I really miss it. Of course. Duque poured the wine and handed the glass to Xion. Xion swirled the crystal glass, letting the rum-like liquid spread in the air, then drank it in one gulp, suddenly saying, "Oh my God! What was I thinking back then? I was afraid that the alliance would swallow my country, so I sealed it off for more than 20 years. Duque shrugged. Aren't you afraid that the alliance will swallow Gilnis now? You should know that without the cataclysm, I would have married 4 queens. Xion was a little disappointed. He did not even dare to look at Duque. He rubbed the glass with his fingers, as if trying to hide his uneasiness. Gilnis is almost finished, regardless of the alliance. Half of the people have turned into werewolves, and the other half are struggling in fear and hunger. I have no choice. But the alliance has a choice, Duque emphasized. Jean's heart almost froze when he heard this. Yes, the alliance did not have to accept Gilnis. Chapter 1780. If it had been the arrogant, eccentric, and self-righteous Jean from before, he would have left already. As time went by, people would actually change. Moreover, Gilnis had left the alliance 5 years after the Dark Portal. Such a long period of time had caused Jean's mentality and temperament to change greatly. Even though he knew that this was probably Duque's test, Jean didn't dare to take the risk. Gilnis no longer had any capital to bargain with the alliance. To put it bluntly, Gilnis was now a forgotten country, a dispensable pebble on the side of the road. Although Jean had been wary of and refused the alliance's infiltration for many years, and although this method had been effective 15 years ago, after the Dark Portal, the prosperity and power of the alliance were displayed in front of the people of Gilnis almost every day after Duque came to power. Especially after South Shore was built into South Shore City, Alterac was rebuilt, and the north and south coasts were built into the ports of Lordaeron. Looking down from the towering cliffs of Gilnis, countless ships could be seen passing through the sea day and night. On the map, South Shore City was located near the junction of 2 sunken continents. For the sake of maritime safety, Duque specially set a route. Merchant ships and warships all sailed from Barradine Bay in the south to South Shore City, and then along the north coast all the way around Hillsbrad Hills and Gilnis to the south. In order to facilitate navigation at night, there was a shore lighthouse every 3 kilometers along the entire coast, except for Gilnis. On the high seas opposite Gilnis territory, Duque also used a large number of murlocs to build lighthouses for the helmsmen to control the ship. During the day they could see the ship directly, and at night, they could see the lights at the bow and stern of the ship. At first, Jean thought that this was a deliberate demonstration by the alliance, but he soon discovered that the maritime trade of the alliance was really flourishing. This was because he could clearly distinguish which were stormwinds, which were Kurtiras, Alteracs, and occasionally Dalagens and Ironforged flags. Recently, he could even see the long-lost flag of the Stromgard Kingdom from Torrent Fortress. On the south coast, there were these and Lordaeron's flags. If these ships symbolized the prosperity of the alliance, then the alliance's flying battleships that occasionally flew by were a declaration of the alliance's strength to the world. After Stromgard was reinstated, the people of Stormgard didn't hesitate to sacrifice their lives and fought bravely on the front lines because of Donna's good sense of justice. Duque increased the treatment of Stormgard and allowed the alliance's newly built 4th Air Fleet to dock next to Riptide Castle. This was not a political threat, but a form of support. This was because the members of this fleet were basically people from Torrential Castle, and the alliance had built a new spare parts production center there, using the minerals in the earthy highlands to produce and maintain the airships there. The alliance was the one who paid. Every member country of the alliance adhered to the principle of those who had the money contribute it, and those who had the strength contribute it. As a newly restored country, Stromgarde's membership fee for the next 10 years was a symbolic 1 gold coin per year. The alliance, on the other hand, paid the Fourth Fleet millions of gold coins for maintenance every year. The industrial system that was created to suit the geography of Stromgarde greatly boosted the local economy. Almost everyone in Riptide Castle could feel the sincerity of the alliance, and their loyalty to the alliance increased. With Gilnis in a desperate situation, Xeon ordered his scouts to secretly gather intelligence on the alliance. And the first thing he knew was how prosperous Alterac was, and how the people of Stromgarde, who were rolling in ruins a few years ago, rose in such a short time. To be honest, he was very envious. But be it Gilnis or him, their positions were quite awkward. The alliance could ignore Gilnis, but if they angered the alliance might even treat the people of Gilnis as monsters and slaughter them all. Xeon himself was even more so. Logically speaking, he was definitely a veteran in the alliance. Among the 7 human kings when the alliance was first established, Turinas and Tanadas, Eden Piranid, Salas Trollbane, Lang Rin, and Dalen Proudmoore all died for various reasons. There was also Anduin Lothar, who was the chief commander. Without Duque Xeon, who wanted to join the alliance again, would be the only first-generation elder. This could be said to be an absolute taboo in politics. If you were more senior than the current leader of the alliance, where would the leader put his face? Fortunately, there was still Duque. At that time, the excessively young Duque was the deputy commander of the alliance. Logically speaking, he was just an admiral. In the original history, finding Malfurion as a middleman was something that had to be done. In this life, it was not so troublesome, and he believed that he understood Duque better. As for Duque saying that the alliance has a choice, Xeon had no objections. He said in a nearly servile tone, "Yes, the alliance has a choice. But Sir Marcus, have you ever thought that the alliance needs a melee soldier?" Oh, Duque was interested. It seemed that Xeon had secretly done his homework. "I think you won't deny that even if the alliance has developed to the point where it has terrifying artillery, but professionals can still ignore the power of artillery to a certain extent, right?" said Xeon carefully. "Yes, go on." Duque nodded. Xeon secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The alliance seriously lacks warrior professionals. Elves and gnomes are not suitable. Their physiques are not suitable. Dwarves and Drenii are both very suitable, but unfortunately, the number of dwarves and Drenii is not large. Humans, who have the largest population, are the most suitable. Unfortunately, compared to beastmen and taurens, the human physiques are not even comparable to trolls. Seeing that Duque did not object, Xeon made a recommendation. Many people of Gilnis have been bitten by werewolves and turned into werewolves, but they can control themselves very well, and will not fall into madness and lose control. These humans turned into werewolves are quite suitable as warriors. Whether it is a quick assault or a head-on confrontation, werewolves are faster than humans, have a better physique, and have stronger vitality. Many injuries that are fatal for humans are not a problem for werewolves. At this point, Xeon's voice became softer. As long as humans do not hate or fear werewolves, I think werewolves will be a very good addition to the alliance. Having said that, he looked eagerly at Duque, stared at Duque's mouth with an expectant gaze, swallowed his saliva, and prepared to listen to the words that would come out of Duque's mouth, which were tantamount to the verdict of a trial. Duque smiled. "Werewolves, right? Actually, there is no problem." Chapter 1781. After hearing Duke's words, Xeon's heart that had been hanging in the air for a long time finally calmed down. The alliance was not Duque's decision, but Duque had the power to veto any external countries joining the alliance. With Duque's green light, the rest was much easier. Of course, for the sake of Gilnis' future, Xeon would definitely visit all the kings and leaders of the alliance. Even if he could not get their support, he would at least get to know them. In fact, Xian was thinking too much. This had to do with him leaving the alliance too early. The 5 years at the Dark Portal was the time when Tarina's was the most aggressive and discriminating against outsiders. At that time, the alliance was a stage for ambitious politicians to seek personal benefits for their own countries. After Duque took over, he swept away the bureaucratic style and narrow-minded nationalism with the help of the economy and military. Through the integration of the natural resources and manpower of the entire Eastern Kingdom, he created the harmonious coexistence of the alliance today. Due to Duke's special method of dealing with the queens of many countries, he controlled the agriculture and trade of the entire alliance. In fact, many of the suggestions passed by the alliance throne without any mandatory requirements had become ironclad laws. Otherwise, whoever caused trouble today would find that there were no more merchants visiting them the next day. The originally cheap food, fruits, minerals, a series of daily necessities produced by light industries, and heavy industry machinery would all be greatly increased or out of stock. Punitive tariffs would also be imposed when entering or leaving the borders of other countries. In a sense, because the alliance in this life was more powerful, and maritime trade was more popular, Gilnes did not have to rely on the sea to replenish its food supply like in history. 15 years after the Dark Portal, King Xian even issued a sea ban, forbidding people from entering within 5 kilometers of the sea. He also set up a large number of sentry towers. Therefore, the food shortage was even more serious. As for Xian's worry about the werewolves being discriminated against, Duque's reaction was even more interesting. Duque shrugged. Now the people are starting to accept the Death Knights. What are you werewolves? As long as you don't go crazy and kill people, nothing will happen. But in order to distinguish the citizens of Gilnes from the Bloodfang werewolves, I will give you a special symbol. Don't worry, nobody will discriminate against werewolves. Really? Old Xian was still in disbelief. Then should I transform? Go ahead. I'll just treat it as a show. The old Wolf King transformed. In just a second, his limbs and body grew as if they were inflated. The muscles on his arms swelled and stretched, and his round fingers became extremely sharp, giving birth to black, sharp claws. A square mouth abruptly elongated into a ferocious wolf head, full of sharp crisscross fangs. Fortunately, his armor was specially made. It would expand as his body changed, so it wouldn't break. Wow, so scary. Duque whistled. There was no trace of fear on his face. The old Wolf King was puzzled and depressed. Duque smiled. Gilnes scouts are failing. They didn't even get so much information. Change back. Jean could only smile foolishly and transform back. I'm not bragging, but the people of the Alliance have long been psychologically immune to shock. Ah. Jean lost his voice. Duque clapped his hands and pretended to call someone, but in fact, it was a voice of the soul. Soon, an elegant female voice sounded outside the study. Master, you called? Come in. Following Duque's call, the old Wolf King saw an elegant noble lady in a red skirt with black trim slowly walk in. King Jean's gentlemanly behavior was acting up. Hello, beautiful lady. I am King Jean Grayman of Gilnes. May I know your name? The beautiful countess glanced at Duque and said with a smile. You can call me by my human name, Countess Katrana. Oh, Jean's heart skipped a beat. Sure enough, there was more. Of course, I prefer the dragon name you call me, Onyxia, the Black Dragon Princess. That's right. I am the daughter of Nethario, the Deathwing who demolished Lordaeron back then. The old Wolf King's expression was very interesting. His heart was about to fly out of his chest, and his mouth was so wide open that it could fit a man's fist. Very satisfied with Xian's reaction, Onyxia, who was completely immersed in her role, revealed a smile full of melancholy. Unfortunately, the current me has already been subdued by the great Master Duke Marcus. I have become a lowly mount, ridden by Master Day and Night. After saying that, she even put on a half-kneeling posture, similar to Lin Dayu's flower burial, and gently pointed out the window with her thumb and middle finger. As a result, Duque slapped her butt, and she let out a small scream on the spot. Duque lifted her skirt and ordered, Come show Jean your tail. Onyxia pouted and did as she was told. Then Jean saw a black, python-like dragon tail sticking out from under her skirt, and the meteor hammer-like tail swung in a circle in the air. Okay, you can go out. Onyxia, who was completely possessed by the drama queen, went out with a face full of resentment, like an abandoned woman abandoned by her lover. Duke's face was full of black lines, and he used another 2 minutes to briefly introduce Onyxia's history in the Alliance, leaving Jean dumbfounded. No, actually, I'm just giving you an example. After I took over the Alliance's soldiers and civilians became quite open-minded. As long as you fight for the Alliance for Azeroth, no matter what kind of existence you are, you should be accepted and respected. Then there will always be opponents, right? Jean asked worriedly. The Alliance respects individual ideas. As long as they don't start rumors, or gather people to promote narrow racist views, the Alliance doesn't care. What if they insist? Duque curled his lips. The Alliance's frontline assault team is always short of people. Last time, there were hundreds of idiots who held up signs and shouted that the noble blood of the Blood Elves should not be tarnished by humans, but they all died fighting against evil. At this moment Jean was moved. Looking at the faint holy golden light on Duque, his eyes became moist. What a noble leader he had in mind. Duque was so universal, so broad-minded. Jean suddenly understood a little why Duque could control such a huge organization with so many races, nationalities, and such a complicated population composition. You are a great man. Oh, a demigod. I salute you from the bottom of my heart. It has nothing to do with status. It's purely out of my personal admiration. With that, the Wolf King bowed deeply to Duque. No, I'm actually doing it for myself. At this moment, Jean thought that Duque was just being polite and didn't take it to heart. Not long after, he realized that what Duque said was actually true. Scum who got in the way of me starting a harem can go shit. Chapter 1782. After sending off the old alpha wolf, Duque was in a good mood. When he returned to his bedroom, he found Alicia staring at him with her big watery eyes. Not going to sleep? I'm just concerned about what our neighbor in Alterac talked to you about. You can come along. Duque didn't care. No, if I go without talking to you, I'll feel less imposing. Duque smiled and didn't say a word. As expected, this was Xion's problem. Most of the leaders in the Alliance were his juniors. If Duque didn't give in, no one wanted to talk to him, let alone promise him anything. This was why Xion had to lower his voice and really tuck his tail between his legs when he rejoined the Alliance. After all, one mistake in Gilnis would be the target of everyone. Duque patted Alicia's butt. Don't worry, it's done. In a sense, the Gilnis werewolves are more useful than the warriors of Riptide Fortress. Okay, then I'll go spread the news. Go. As the weakest member of Duque's harem, Alicia had her own unique role. She was more like a logistics housekeeper. Born in the wealthy Bear family, she carried this trait forward after becoming the queen. Now, she not only controlled more than half of the Alliance's business activities, but she was also Duque's intelligence chief and press officer. There was no such thing as freedom of speech in Azeroth, so Duque happily copied the Chinese press. Ever since Duque became the commander of the Alliance, he had a plan to guide the public opinion of the Alliance. When the pressure of war was high, he would publicize the dangers of the evil faction, eulogize the sacrifice of the frontline soldiers, and point out the contribution of the people in the rear to the frontline. Because the reports were quite real, and everything could be verified when the frontline soldiers returned in triumph, the Alliance's official report was very credible, and the people accepted it very well. What Duque didn't know was that after tonight, Alicia's Royal Pen Group would write about the role of the Gilneas people in the Second World War. While almost ignoring the conflict between Tyreenas and Xion, he pointed out the suffering of the people of Gilneas. They claimed that they were also victims of the werewolf curse. With this foreshadowing, it was only logical for the Alliance to announce Gilnes's membership after Jean had communicated with the leaders of the various countries. At this time, Alicia was talking about something else. Oh yes, why does Sister Kalia's stomach seem to be quiet again? Duque smiled bitterly. I already have the body of a demigod. It's not so easy to give birth to a demigod's son. If she rashly allowed her child to wantonly absorb nutrients from her mother's body, Kalia would instantly turn into a dried corpse. Also, in order to give birth to my child, I must try my best to eliminate my other elements and combine them with her own suitable elements. For example, Aurelia is wind, so she can only give birth to children of the wind attribute. Alicia was tongue-tied. I'm also a mage, wouldn't it be easier for me? Duke's eyes swept across Alicia's smooth belly. With your radiant moon strength, you're able to allow a child of a demigod to absorb fire, ice, and arcane elemental energy without limit? Ah! Alicia first cried out in surprise, then suddenly became full of energy. Yes, it's time for me to become a Breaking Dawn mage. Seeing Alicia waving her little fists excitedly like a little girl, Duque really didn't want to discourage her. Success was 1% talent and 99% perspiration. Unfortunately, it was often that 1% that determined a person's upper limit. In history, Alicia had left the stage of history early, partly because of her tragic fate, but also because her talent was too low. Otherwise, even if she became an undead, she could still grow into a lich like Kel Thuzad. Duque checked her body and found that her elemental affinity was really not high. Unless Duke ascended to become a true god and gave Alexia a complete body transformation to increase the degree of elemental conversion, the Radiant Moon realm would be her limit. We'll see how things go in the future. Just like that, 7 days later, the Alliance welcomed the Throne Conference. Although a few leaders were absent due to attack missions, the remaining leaders of the Alliance voted unanimously to allow Gilnis to rejoin the Alliance. Additionally, after the various countries of the Alliance signed a series of trade contracts and food aid plans with Gilnis, Gilnis would send out werewolf troops to join the Alliance's military. On the other hand, the Alliance would send out the newly formed 7th Army to help Gilnis clear out the bloodthirsty werewolves in his territory. At the same time, Kale, that's would also send out his subordinate, Astromancer Caponia, to destroy Gilnis' Shadowfang Castle. When the Alliance took in the last piece of the puzzle, something happened that made Duque dumbfounded. At this point in history, Duque wasn't sure if this had anything to do with the godly dragon's tail. Originally, the twin-headed ogre boss Google would hide in the Twilight Fortress in the Twilight Highlands in the east of the wetlands, waiting for the powerhouses of the Alliance and the Horde to challenge him. In this life, perhaps the Alliance managed the entire Eastern Kingdom like an iron bucket, or perhaps the Alliance's airship fleet prevented Google from returning to his nest. History took a big turn. Google led a large group of Twilight believers and occupied the Great Rift Valley in the Barrenlands after the Cataclysm. Now this terrifying lava scar divided the Barrenlands into the North and South Barrenlands. Google stayed in the middle of the Great Rift Valley in the creeping oasis that was created due to the tectonic shift, recruiting believers and building a fortress. Because the Horde's current predicament was far worse than in history, Google's lunatic doomsday theory attracted more than 200,000 tribesmen to join. In the end, Google announced that this was the Twilight Fortress. One Google alone was enough to give brain-dead Roar a headache, but there were also a lot of eyewitness reports. A very powerful giant dragon, that seemed to be an undead dragon, led a group of purplish-red giant dragons to the Twilight Fortress. This greatly strengthened the combat power of the new Twilight Fortress. To make matters worse for the Horde, the purplish-red giant dragons that used the Twilight Fortress as their base began to hunt for food in the vicinity, indiscriminately attacking any creature that didn't have the emblem of a Twilight believer. Regardless of whether it was wild animals, monsters, orcs, trolls, or taurens, everything that could move was within their attack range. After Duke confirmed the news, he let out an almost hysterical laugh. According to Aluhia, it sounded like a pig laughing. Ha ha ha. Braindead Roar, this is what you get. Chapter 1783. Like in history, the Twilight Fortress was definitely the Alliance's fault. After all, the fortress was too close to the dwarves' Loch Moden. The fortress that was supposed to be on the Twilight Highlands was less than 300 kilometers away from the eastern border of Loch Moden. Before the cataclysm, the entire Twilight Highlands was under the protection of N'Zotha's evil power and was hidden behind a chain of towering mountains. Although Duque knew where the Twilight Highlands was, before the cataclysm, the Twilight Highlands was just a wasteland with an average altitude of more than 4,000 meters. The air was thin, and there was nothing there. Perhaps it was because the Alliance's attack on the Twilight cult was too severe, or after the cataclysm, the Twilight Highlands that was supposed to be the Twilight Highlands was not as expected. Anyway, after Duque sent Lang and Kale, that's to lead a large force to wipe out the Twilight believers in the grim battle fortress, the Twilight Highlands became different from history. It was still filled with all kinds of death aura and changes in the Earth's crust. But there were no Twilight believers. It was a waste of effort for Duque to train the Highland troops to fight in the mountains. Fighting in the Highlands was not the same thing as fighting in the plains at low altitude. The air was thin because of the high altitude. Water that could be boiled at 100 degrees Celsius could not be boiled in the Highlands. If they were still using the old steam-driven flying battleships, they would definitely fall from the sky and die. Not only did the weapons have to be redesigned, but the people also had to be rearranged. Before Duque traveled through time, every year, people from the Celestial Empire would travel to the Highlands and die, because they could not withstand the altitude sickness. It was not until the incident in the Barren Lands that Duque realized that the Twilight believers had gone to the Horde to cause trouble. Ha 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 ha, Duque suddenly felt refreshed. In a sense, the cataclysm was like a preview of Return of the Legion. It was no longer possible for them to concentrate all their troops and experts to launch an all-out attack like before. However, most of the strong enemies in the cataclysm were under the control of the current alliance. Even if he was prepared, Duque was still quite nervous. This was especially true for a few spots in the Eastern Kingdom. Duque had spent 10 years to forge the Rotterdam Kingdom and the southern continent into an impregnable fortress. He did not want to see the situation that he had painstakingly built be destroyed. According to history, the southern continent suffered the most. Next to the wetlands of the dwarves was grim battle, and east of Loch Moden was the Twilight Citadel. Originally, the Black Rock Mountain would be the Black Rock Cave and the Black Wing Blood Ring. Zalbalad, an outlying island in the southwest of Gilneas, was even more haunted by the Paladin prison. But it was a little funny now. The Twilight Citadel, which was supposed to be the most difficult to deal with, was now in the hands of the Horde. The final boss of the Twilight Citadel was Onyxia's mother, Sinestra. According to the player's evaluation, she was more difficult to deal with than Deathwing. Just let her do whatever she wants to the tribe. At least on Duque's side. At least Onyxia wouldn't have to face the tragedy of family ethics again. As for Paladin Prison, it was a fucking prison. Could it be that if Duque had known about this beforehand, he would still let the prisoners in there cause trouble? After the second battle of the Dark Portal, the Paladin Fortress on the outlying island was converted into a prison to hold the scariest prisoners in Azeroth. Back then, the first prisoners were a few injured Gorons and a large group of ogres and Horde war wolves. The purpose was to conduct research. During the third battle, when Archimonde led the main force of the Burning Legion west to the Endless Sea, they ran to Mount Hyjal to cause trouble. Actually, there were still a large number of demons aimlessly destroying and killing everywhere. After the elite army of the Alliance wiped out these demons, the Kirin Tor mages left some demons behind for research purposes. Back then Duque had also agreed to this. Of course, he had a better understanding of the characteristics of demons, but what if the demons were different from the ones in history? Nothing was more convincing than first-hand experimental data. The Kirin Tor mages had built an extremely tight magical imprisonment system in the prison, so that the demons who were not yet Void Lords had no chance of escaping. However, The destructive impact of the cataclysm was destined to cause damage to the prison's defense system. After the Battle of the Lich King in Northrend, the first thing Duque did was to visit the Paladin prison. Coincidentally, he found that the 3 targets who were supposed to cause trouble during the cataclysm had secretly advanced to low-level Void Lords. Firstly, under the prison's powerful magical suppression, their strength was not even half of their peak. Secondly, they had hidden their strength very well. But how could they hide it from Duque? Duque gave an order, saying that there were prisoners who wanted to cause trouble. Immediately, a large number of the Alliance's rookies were transferred here to train. Mara for Dragon, Lena Thunderspear, the Dwarf Paladin Crumb Twilight's Hammer, the troublemaking Dwarf Mage Millhouse Mana Storm, the Great Mage Uniet, the Great Conjurer Mimic, the Hunter Lenera. With Duque, Queen Sylph and Magni, who had yet to turn into a diamond, the Abyss Lord Argaros and the 2-headed Hellhound Ocutor were all killed after a fierce battle. Of course, souls couldn't escape. Lord Duque, the former Void Lord, used soul annihilation for the first time in a long time. This made the Eridar Gemini, who had turned into a female elf mage and hid their faces in their hoods, fall silent for a long time. Only Queen Elizabar, who belonged to the same race as Mother Shiraz and belonged to Shavala, was left behind. Duque did a small experiment. He used the same method he used to deal with Onyxia to deal with this Queen of Hatred. The driving force of hatred was to hate the world, or to look down on the arrogant attitude of lower life forms. Duque taught this 6-armed murderous female demon a lesson, the meaning of endless reincarnation torture. In the illusion that the system specially created for her, Elizabar was first asked by Duque's illusion, "Do you surrender?" If she received a negative answer, or if she remained silent for more than 3 seconds, the next stage would be the countless Karaji insect men rushing out and swallowing the defenseless Elizabar whole. That was the cruelest kind of devouring. The huge mouthparts did not care about the demon's poisonous blood. Elizabar could clearly feel the sharp and rough mouthparts slowly tearing off her flesh. The bones in her 6 arms were forcefully chewed to pieces. The sensation from the resonance of her bones and flesh was equally clear. She screamed and struggled, but found that she could not resist at all. She could only watch in despair and fear as the huge insects pulled out her intestines and swallowed them piece by piece. Chapter 1784. Elizabeth hoped that the first bite the worm took was her head. Unfortunately, it wasn't. The worm began to eat from the fingers and toes of her 6 arms, bit by bit, section by section, rhythmically from bottom to top, eating her up bit by bit, until she was left with only her head. She could still see how the worm's mouth, full of blood and mucus, had bitten off her face. Then she resurrected. Once again, he appeared in front of the hungry Zergs and scathed, "Do you surrender?" "Yes, I surrender." Most demons were psychopathic, and the desire to kill and destroy that exceeded most creatures in the mortal world was one of the most prominent characteristics of the Burning Legion demons. Not many existences knew that the evil existences that mortals called demons did not have as strong a will as imagined. After being eaten by the illusion a dozen times, Elizabeth collapsed. She immediately shouted for surrender. "Very good, you've surrendered, but you're not convinced yet. You need the second stage of the lesson. This time, you don't have the final say. I have the final say," the illusion Duque announced. Then, Elizabeth received the torture of the various demon bosses' illusions. From Sargeras to kill Jaden to Archimond, and then to the famous bosses of the various demon races in the Legion, such as the leader of the Dreadlord Tichondrius. Regardless of whether they were dead or alive, they would take turns to fight. From whipping the tri-horned horse, to the common soul torture of various legions, to the unique torture of each legion leader. Those feelings were all real, because this was the feeling that Duque had obtained from experimenting on the captured demons when he attacked the Outland. Among them was Shavala, who had been captured from the Darkness Temple. The system elf connected the demon's nervous system from the spine of the neck of the demon, accurately receiving the bioelectricity and soul data from all parts of the body. It sorted out and classified them, carefully evaluated their strength and stimulation, and finally copied the biological nerve signals and soul senses that represented pain, and used them on the illusion attack. Then, Duque also extracted the memories of the Eridar twins. These two demonesses had done a lot of bad things in the past 25,000 years. Due to Duze's actions in the ancient war, they had been tortured by Kill Jaden for the past 10,000 years. When Duque copied their pain memories, Elizabeth really felt that her balls were always torturing her. Demons were never obedient children who did not fight back. Under the extreme pain, she had long forgotten that it was Duque who cast the illusion on her. Because in her memories, it was the Burning Legion's boss who was torturing her. It was all accumulated hatred towards the Burning Legion. It was not an exaggeration to say that this was the infinite Azeroth spell that only Duque possessed. As long as Duque was willing, he could use a million different ways to torture Elizabeth. In this extremely terrifying torture of the mind, body and soul, Queen of Hatred Elizabeth changed. In the open space of the prison, the Eridar twins looked at Elizabeth, who was being pressed on the head by Duque's doppelganger. At first, they kept twitching as if they were having an epileptic seizure. Their facial expressions relaxed for a moment, and then became extremely tense again. At the most exaggerated point, this six-armed demoness had urinary and fecal incontinence, and was bleeding from her 7 orifices. Unfortunately, Duque used shadow healing, and used shadow energy to repair her body. The Gemini knew that Duque was doing an experiment to see if he could use a more perfect mind control method to dominate a real Void Lord. This was not the terrible demon enslavement that warlocks used to forcibly dominate a demon's mind and suppress its will, but a more vicious brainwashing. They did not dare to make a sound, for fear that Duque's methods would be used on them. If it was a simple brainwashing, Duque would only need 1 second, but there was a high chance that it would burn Elizabeth's brain and destroy her soul. Therefore, Duque experimentally and rhythmically adjusted the output of the system's doppelganger. Finally, after 10 minutes, Elizabeth's entire body collapsed to the ground in a rather inelegant crawling position, her face stuck to the dirty ground, covered in mud. As she twitched and got up, Duque asked her, "Answer me, demoness, who is the existence you hate the most?" The Chevalian leader replied without hesitation, "Kill Jaden." The way she gnashed her teeth was as if Kill Jaden had raped her 10,000 times, and killed her 10,000 times. The next moment, however, she shivered. Duque had injected another illusion into her, allowing her to relive what she had seen in the illusion from a third-person perspective. She only felt that her soul had frozen in that instant, because of absolute fear. The reason why the Burning Legion's triumvirate was terrifying was that they had the supreme power to destroy a planet at will. Unexpectedly, this native demigod in front of her had a power that was completely different from the triumvirate. It was a special technique that played with memories and tortured the soul. It was ironic that there would come a day when the demons, who were best at torturing other creatures, would concede defeat in torturing methods. The Queen of Hatred's legs softened, and she knelt down with a crash, all 6 palms pressed on the ground, and her once noble head now bowed to Duque. This time, it was Duque himself who asked faintly, "Do you really want to surrender?" "Yes, I'm sincere." Duque carefully observed the lie detector in the system genie. This was the reference value calculated through big data statistics by torturing tens of thousands of demons, recording their heartbeats, blood reactions, and soul fluctuations. The lie detector showed that she really surrendered. Very good. Duque slightly pulled up the Queen of Hatred's crown and branded a special Titan rune mark on her forehead. Aha! It was a heart-wrenching scream. Leaving the Queen of Hatred limp on the ground, Duque said lightly to Gemini, "From now on, she will be your pawn." Duke Marcus. His methods were terrifying. Back to the present, because of Du's vicious attack, the molten core was flooded. The entire Black Rock Mountain became a large fountain. Not only did he force the Black Iron Dwarves out, but it seemed that even Nefarian, who was supposed to be resurrected as a zombie dragon and reoccupy the Black Rock Mountain, was also gone. After all, after Nefarian's body was stolen, Duque had already predicted that Nefarian would jump out again. Duque himself suppressed the main force and did not move, because he was ready to wait for Nefarian to come out to seek death, and then destroy him with lightning speed. In fact, Duque did not know that because he had previously tricked Deathwing so badly that not even a few bones were left, Enzos had to let Deathwing eat his own son. Therefore, there was no such place as the Blackwing Blood Ring in this world after the Cataclysm. Without the Paladin Prison, the Twilight Fortress, and the Blackwing Blood Ring, the Alliance's three biggest internal problems were removed. Chapter 1785. Don't even think about going out if your house is on fire. Everyone knew this. While the Alliance was quickly eliminating internal threats, the Horde was in a great crisis. The existence of the new Twilight Fortress was like a fishbone stuck in the throat of the Horde. Even though the barren lands were barren, their geographical location was extremely important. To the east of Duroder was the sea, and to the north was Azhara. To contact the other territories of the Horde, they had to go west or south. No matter where they went, they had to go through the barren lands. The lava rift that stretched from the northeast to the southwest and divided the barren lands into two halves was already a headache for the Horde. It was originally something that could be solved by building a few bridges, but when Gujar stirred up trouble, it suddenly became a matter of life and death for the Horde. The reason why the great chiefs never let the traitors go was because, although a strong foreign enemy would oppress the Horde, they would also unite the Horde. And the traitors would split the Horde and dig out the roots of the Horde. Gul'dan and the Blackhand brothers from before had all met with a good end. Of course, for a moron like Gurus, it was only because the betrayal made him lose face, which was also against tradition. Damn it! I can't trust other races. I should have twisted off all the heads of that two-headed monster. Moron Roar was indeed worthy of the name Hellscream. At least his voice was loud enough that his roar could be heard by the entire Wisdom Valley. Of course, he had the right to speak without thinking and hurt the hearts of other races. But this time, the other chiefs could only pretend that they didn't hear him. This was because this incident was not just a problem in the Orc territory, but several large areas around it had been attacked by the Twilight Dragon. The barren lands were said to be barren lands. It was a very simple problem of the food chain. How could a barren land support a large number of herbivores? Without large herbivores, how could a giant creature like the dragon, who was at the top of the food chain, survive? To the northwest of the Vine Oasis was the Stoneclaw Mountain area. To the west was Magoliai, which was covered in green grass and herds of Kodos. The main city of the Taran Thunder Cliff was here. To the southwest was Farilas, which was lush with vegetation. About 300 kilometers to the east was the nest of the Dark Spear Trolls, Dark Spear Island. Further west of the Thunder Cliff was a desolate oasis in the middle of the region. These were all F*King tribal territories. And the Twilight WRMS that had been nurtured by Nesario had completely treated these places as their hunting grounds and back gardens. Ordinary tribal warriors couldn't fight against these terrifying dragons at all. Once upon a time, the great dragon scientist Nefarian had researched a new type of dragon, the multicolored fish powder. Oh no, it was the multicolored dragon. Nefarian's research direction was to fuse the abilities of the pentashade dragons in an attempt to create a new all-round dragon that was not afraid of the power of the dragons. He also used the technology of the goblins to speed up its growth, and finally succeeded in creating the colorful dragons. Although there was a huge gap between their strength and that of a real giant dragon, their advantage lay in their rapid growth, the ease of mass production, and the lack of fear of giant dragon power. Unfortunately, this research had just made a breakthrough when it was discovered by the Red Dragon Army. Then, Dumuk led a team to cause trouble and destroyed this great invention. Nefarian's biological mother, Sinestra, the spouse that Deathwing had forcibly brought back, had been conducting research in this area alone. Although her purpose was not to fight against the dragon aspect, but to take revenge on the crazy Deathwing. Sinestra noticed that the batch of black dragon eggs that had been brought to the Outland by a certain dragon during the Second Orc War had mutated in the broken world of the Outland because of the chaotic energy in the twisted void, and a new type of dragon was hatched, the Nether Dragon. The Nether Dragon was not as powerful as the dragon aspect, but it grew rapidly. Because it was born in the Outland environment, it had no connection with the Black Dragon army, and was not affected by the fallen power of the ancient gods. However, it was enslaved by Magtheridon and later Illidan's Fel Orc tribe. Sinestra successfully obtained a large batch of Nether Dragon eggs from Zuluhid, the chief of the Dragonmaw tribe, and began her own transformation. After many experiments, she and her blood elf Zandari finally found a way to combine the essence of a black dragon with the essence of a Nether Dragon, and infused it into her own dragon eggs. In the end, a new type of dragon was hatched, the Twilight Dragon. Compared to other dragons, the Twilight Dragon's strength was comparable. Its special ability was to create a unique domain of twilight, and use this space to crazily absorb energy from the outside world to promote its growth. As long as there was enough energy for it to absorb, it would only take a few months, or even a few weeks for it to hatch to adulthood. Ordinary dragons, on the other hand, needed 1,000 years to hatch to adulthood. Moreover, this new type of dragon was evil and greedy, even more so than the fallen black dragon. Sinestra died because of the backlash. Although Sinestra died, the remaining Twilight Dragon eggs and the transformation technology had been mastered by Deathwing. After that, Deathwing reconciled with the ancient god. With the power of the ancient god, Deathwing perfected this technology, simplifying the process of corruption into a kind of corruption power. No matter what kind of dragon's egg, if infected, could quickly hatch into an evil Twilight Dragon. Moreover, these Twilight Dragons had no brains and only obeyed the orders of Deathwing. Even if an adult dragon was contaminated by this evil power, it would be difficult to escape the fate of corruption. With the technology to transform the Twilight Dragon, and the various dragon eggs stolen by the Twilight Hammer cult, Deathwing established a Twilight Dragon Legion in a very short period of time. Whether it was quantity or quality, it was enough to fight against the allied forces of the 4 dragon aspects. Such a Twilight Dragon was not something that the weak air force of the tribe could fight against. Whether it was the brave orcs, the stronger Tauren, the trolls who were good at throwing javelins, or the goblins of the Rustwater conglomerate, who were placed in the Stonetalan mountain in this life, none of them were a match for the Twilight Dragons. Originally, Gorin of the Desolace was not afraid of the Twilight Dragons. But these brainless Twilight Dragons still angered Gorin's boss, Dragon Slayer Gruul. Most of the dragons were highly intelligent creatures. When Gruul played the Black Dragon Skewer in the Blade Peak Mountain, a large number of black dragons were shocked. Except for the first few black dragons, and later a dozen black dragons who went for revenge, but failed to kill Gruul. There was no trace of the black dragons in the Blade Peak Mountain. Gruul did the same this time. After killing the Twilight Dragons, he played the Dragon Skewer. But the Twilight Dragons had no brains. They were still indifferent to the corpses of their companions. They hunted those that should be killed, set those that should be set on fire. They made Gruul's territory a mess, and many Gorons died. Why is the nearby Dustswallow swamp fine? The brainless roar cursed. The Alliance has Onyxia. Chapter 1786. Comparisons were odious. When comparing goods, one had to throw them away. If the Alliance did not have Duque, they would be like the Horde, helpless against the Twilight Dragon's invasion. When a giant dragon reached adulthood, its defense, attack, and vitality would all be considerable. If a young dragon could still be injured by lighter weapons such as flintlocks and javelins, then once they reached adulthood, Their hardened scales and dragon skin would allow them to ignore damage from cannons and below. The tribe had an air force, and most of them were two-legged flying dragons. Unfortunately, as a pseudo-dragon, it could not overcome the natural flaw of a true dragon like the Twilight Wyvern. Once it encountered a real dragon, the wyvern would panic and lose control. It would either flee or fight back, but it would be as weak as a lowly whose clothes had been torn off and forced into a corner. Gruul was very strong, but in the end, this monster with a demigod body was just a super large infantry. No matter how fast it ran, how could it keep up with so many twilight dragons that were flying around like blind flies? Only then did the Horde realize how heaven-defying it was for the Alliance to have a demigod dragon directly under them. This was cheating. The Dustwallow Swamp was Onyxia's lair. Before she went to Stormwind to wreak havoc, this once evil she-dragon was a local tyrant. Don't look at how she was ordered around by Duque after being subdued by Duque. In fact, she had many underlings. More than 10 adult dragons, more than 100 baby dragons, more than 300 dragon beasts, and about 1,000 to 800 baby dragons. This was the entire lineup of her little brother army. After knowing that the Twilight Fortress had been moved to the Barren Lands, Duque put Onyxia back in her lair, so that she and Janus Theramore could cover for each other. If something went wrong, they could cover each other's escape. He knew that Onyxia was like a Haushiko Haki, killing more than 100 Twilight dragons in a row without panting. Could this be the legendary Swamp, Mountain, 100-Dragon Tyrant? After causing the Twilight Dragon to run to Dustwallow Swamp, Braindead Roar cursed. Is there no one stronger than the Twilight Fortress to deal with that lowly female dragon? There was an answer. If that person came out, it was guaranteed that Onyxia would follow her heart. Following her heart, wasn't it just the word coward? The boss of the Twilight Fortress was naturally Onyxia's old mother, Sinestra. The problem was that her mother had been dead for a long time, and was now a corpse dragon. Did the zombie dragon need to eat? Stop joking. As long as Wings and the Great Mother didn't make a move, Onyxia was the undisputed ruler of the skies. The Twilight Dragons had a couple of powerful players, but they were nothing compared to the new Earth Guardian Dragon, Ao. However, Onyxia just guarded her own nest, and didn't go anywhere. She would kill whoever came, and she wouldn't go out. It was as if she was a lady from a respectable family who never left the house. To put it bluntly, she was an otaku. Because of Brainless Roar, the Horde fell out with the Alliance. The Alliance pretended not to notice the Horde's predicament. Little Salyafar secretly asked Wajin, "What's the situation on the Alliance's side?" Wajin smiled bitterly. "The Alliance continues to report the situation to me. The Storm Naga went to Vastra, the Blood Elves went to Uldum, the Dwarves and the Alliance's flying fleet are cleaning up grim battle, and the Alliance's navy is dealing with the riots in Baradin prison. They look very busy." Several foreign chiefs smiled bitterly. After working with the Alliance for so many years, they roughly knew how much the Alliance had. Although the Alliance looked like they were putting out fires everywhere. In fact, the Alliance's main force didn't move at all. As the Alliance's strongest force, Duque didn't participate in the war. The infantry of Stormwind, the elites of the Watchtower, and the two flying cities. They didn't even need to use their main forces. Just the flying insect army of the Karaji insect people would be enough to fight evenly with the Twilight Dragon army of the Barren Land. The Alliance was now obviously unhappy with Gurus Hellscream, since the great chief of the Horde didn't even give the Alliance an invitation. Why should the Alliance go all the way from the Eastern Kingdom to help you get rid of the Twilight Fortress? It was at this time that Gurus made up his mind. The territory of the Horde must be defended by us. Varrock, gather all the warriors of the Horde. We will attack the Twilight Fortress in the Barren Lands. Yes. Varrock punched his chest and accepted the order. Perhaps Gurus' diplomatic strategy was a mess, but at least he was qualified as an orc leader. Fighting for the orcs, fighting for the territory. This kind of heroism from ancient times touched Varrock's heart. At this moment, all the orcs and foreign chiefs, including Varrock, didn't think that Gurus was such a scam. Thus, since the establishment of the new Horde, the largest war mobilization began. The orcs, Tauren, trolls, goblins, and the Forgotten, these 5 major races could be said to be the elites. With a large number of escorts from Gollans, more than 1 million troops were coming from all directions, ready to besiege the nail in the heart of the Horde, the Twilight Fortress. When Duque heard this news, he laughed. Haha, this is really interesting. Then I wish Mr. Gurus victory, and let him become a hero of the Horde. To be honest, Duque didn't think that Braindead Roar would be able to defeat the Black Dragon's mother at all. The Deathwing family was a rather difficult existence to deal with, and who knew how many players had been traumatized by it in the past. Onyxia's deep breaths, Nefarian's 5-colored rock-paper-scissors, Sinestra's yo-yos, and the mighty Deathwing actually split and attacked multiple times. However, Duque still gave Onyxia a death order. If she saw her mother charging over, she had to run without another word, even if she had to abandon Theramore. Duque didn't want to lose a well-tamed female black dragon. At this time, Tyron sent a message. Come quickly, Duque. As expected, Ragnaros's target is Mount Hyjal. Mount Hyjal had been the holy land of the Night Elves for tens of thousands of years. Even during the third battle at the Dark Portal, they had to give up a large part of the forest in order to kill Archimonde, and almost the entire mountain was blown up. Even so, the elves didn't completely give up on Mount Hyjal. A large number of druids stayed on Mount Hyjal, hoping to restore the holy mountain, which had been mostly destroyed by the explosion, to its original state. It didn't matter if it took 100, 1,000, or 10,000 years. Anyway, even if they lost their endless life, the Night Elves were still a race with terrifying longevity. You're tuning in to the Lee May's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.